This is The Other Side of the Bell, episode... Oh, we don't do that anymore. Hello, and welcome to The Other Side of the Bell, a podcast dedicated to everything trumpet, brought to you by Bob Reeves Brass. We'll help you take your trumpet playing to the next level. I'm John Snell, trumpet specialist at Bob Reeves Brass, and I'll be your host for today. Joining me this episode is Trumpeter Dave Trigg. We'll get to Dave's interview here in a moment after a word from our sponsor and some trumpet news. Today's episode is brought to you by Bob Reeves Brass, who share your passion for creating extraordinary music. You know that feeling when your instrument just clicks and the music flows effortlessly? That's what Bob Reeves Brass has been helping customers do since 1968. We've helped brass musicians like you achieve their dreams by ensuring their equipment is always in perfect harmony. We know you want to immerse yourself in the art of music making, and we're here to remove any barriers between you and your creative vision. At Bob Reeves Brass, we work closely with you to understand your unique needs and provide tailored solutions like valve alignments, custom-fit mouthpieces from our extensive stock models or a hand-carved custom mouthpiece, gap adjustments with the Reeves sleeve system, or even tweaking your existing gear. No matter your level of experience, we offer free consultations and serve musicians from all walks of life. And if you're looking for the perfect instrument to inspire your next musical masterpiece, we proudly carry the exquisite Van Laar line of trumpets and flugelhorns, as well as the superb Charlie Davis line of trumpets. What's more, Bob Reeves Brass is taking their commitment to your musical journey even further. We're now offering a carefully curated collection of top-notch products designed specifically for brass musicians. You'll find premium guard bags to protect your beloved instruments, a diverse range of mutes from renowned brands like Ulvain mutes, Yupon and Okura mutes from Japan, Trumcore mutes, Rayano, Clary Wood mutes, and Charlie Davis mutes, ensuring you have the perfect mute for every performance. But that's not all. We've also got you covered when it comes to essential maintenance supplies, with a hand-picked selection of valve oils, lubricants, and more to keep your instruments in tip-top shape. Bob Reeves Brass is truly your one-stop shop for everything you need to fuel your passion and create music that touches hearts and souls. So go ahead, let us help you elevate your sound to new heights. Don't wait another moment to elevate your musical journey with Bob Reeves Brass. Connect with us at bobreeves.com, shoot us an email at info@bobreeves.com, and keep up with the latest news on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter at Bob Reeves Brass. Embrace your passion for music and let Bob Reeves Brass be your partner in creating the extraordinary. It's been a whirlwind of a year so far here at Bob Reeves Brass, and first of all, I want to thank all of you who sent in feedback after our last episode with Mark Caparone. Mark is exactly the kind of player I love having on this podcast because, if you're in the traditional jazz band circuits, you'll know Mark's name. He's a household name, but for those outside of them, you may have not been familiar with Mark before last episode. So a lot of you have already done a deep dive into early jazz trumpet, the Bix Beiderbecks and the Louis Armstrong's Hot 5s and 7s and things that we talked about last episode. And hopefully we'll be inspired to keep that music around even longer. So again, huge thank you to Mark Caparone. And if you didn't hear last episode, go back in the archives and listen to it. We had a lot of fun. A couple huge things. Oh, it's always something big, right? First of all, we are so proud to carry Shire's instruments, SE Shire's, here at the shop. We have a ton of trombones. So if you have any trombone friends, or you double, or you're a trombone player that just likes hanging out on the Other Side of the Bell podcast, we have plenty of Shire's trombones in stock, and we are amassing as many trumpets as we can. They are harder to come by. However, we do have a few customs as of this moment, who knows if they will be in stock at the time of the posting of this podcast, but you can always check our website, trumpetmouthpiece.com, to see what we have. We try to keep our inventory up to date. We do have plenty of Q series trumpets, which, to be honest, I was really surprised about. I've heard mixed reviews over the years, and, we went down to the NAMM show, which is the huge National Association of Music Merchants conference here in Anaheim in January, and went with some friends, and we were blown away by the Q series they had on the floor, and I was able to get them. So we have those NAMM horns. So if you happen to go to NAMM and played one of those horns, we have the ones that hadn't sold already. We have those here, particularly the C trumpets and the E flat D trumpet. They were really surprising. How good they were for the price. And so for a weekend warrior or someone who doesn't want to drop $4,000 or $5,000 on a new custom horn, the Q Series Shires trumpets are a great alternative. And if you get the horn through us, we include the Reeves valve alignment for free. So that makes them even more compelling. So we are excited to have Shires trumpets and trombones. Fabulous people. We've been fans of them for a long time. And great to have their instruments here with the other cool horns we carry, like the Van Laars and the Charlie Davis trumpets. So if you're in and around the area, swing by and try some Shires horns out. Speaking of which, if you are in and around Corpus Christi, and more specifically Kingsville, Texas, we are going to be there here in a few weeks, March 8th to 11th, for the National Trumpet Competition. We are very proud this year to be the large trumpet ensemble division sponsor, which is a big deal for us, normally reserved for things like horn makers and big music stores. And so it was a real honor for us to be able to do that. We are also sponsoring the mariachi group at National Trumpet Competition this year. So again, the wonderful folks who put on that the competition, and the participants, whether you win or lose, always do an amazing job. And it's really inspiring for us just to be there, seeing all of these hundreds. Last year was over 1,000 high school, college, graduate, and military age trumpet players giving their all. So again, back to the goal here, March 8th through 11th, we will be there. We will be doing valve alignments. So you can go, there'll be a link where you can go to our website, bobreeves.com/NTC 2024, and that you can get a discount on valve alignments done right there at the booth. At NTC. We'll have all of our mouthpieces. We will have whatever Shires trumpets we have in stock. We will have some Van Laars. We'll have some Charlie Davis trumpets. We'll have mutes. We'll have guard bags. You name it. Brett and I will be there for consultations, and we will have special guests. Our special guest this year will be Greg Black mouthpieces. So not only if you don't like a Bob Reeves mouthpiece, you can get a Greg Black mouthpiece. And if you don't like a Greg Black mouthpiece, you can get a Bob Reeves mouthpiece. So they will be at our booth as well. So see you there. Kingsville, which is at Texas A&M University in Kingsville, Texas, March 8th through 11th. That is all the news I have for today. And let's get right to my interview with Dave Trigg. Dave Trigg is a celebrated trumpeter whose remarkable career has spanned over 4 decades, showcasing his extraordinary talent alongside some of the music industry's most iconic figures. From his early days as the lead trumpeter with the Ringling Brothers Circus World House Band to touring nationally with Holiday on Ice and playing alongside legends like Maynard Ferguson, Dave has demonstrated an unparalleled versatility. His performances have graced the stages of Broadway in shows such as Wonderful Town and Hello, Dolly. And he has shared the spotlight with luminaries including Frank Sinatra, Whitney Houston, and Quincy Jones. In the 1990s, Dave's career took a significant turn when he joined Natalie Cole's band, leading to global tours and collaborations with major orchestras like the BBC Symphony and the Los Angeles Philharmonic. His contributions to Cole's Grammy-winning albums and appearances on high-profile TV shows such as The Tonight Show and Oprah have highlighted his exceptional skills. Since moving to New York in 1999, Dave has continued to enchant audiences at major jazz festivals around the world and perform with esteemed ensembles, maintaining his status as a sought-after talent in the music industry. And now, without further ado, here is my interview with Dave Trigg. Well, I'm so honored to have joining me today, Dave Trigg, all the way from New York. Dave, how are you doing today?
Just doing fine, John. Nice to be here.
Oh, man, I'm so excited to talk trumpet with you. And let's start right at the beginning. What was your first experience with the trumpet?
Let's see. My first experience with the trumpet was so it was the summer after I turned 12, and I grew up in Orlando, Florida. Not too many people actually grew up there. People came there, but I actually did grow up in Orlando. And I saw an advertisement in the newspaper that one of the only one local music store at the time, Bandwagon Music, was offering for the kids to come to the junior high, and you could try an instrument. So one of my older sisters had already played violin, so I kind of had a little toe in. Didn't have to persuade my parents too much, and my mom took me over there, and I tried a couple different instruments. Tried hitting the drums, and tried I think French horn. And the fellow who was representing the music store at the time handed me it was a cornet. I didn't know what it was. It was a cornet. And I was able to kind of blast a few notes on it. And he looked at my mom and said, "That one's for him."
That's it. Wow. So,
and a little side note, that gentleman, me being 12, I had no idea. I ended up studying. He was my first trumpet teacher, and he's been gone now about 5, 6, maybe a little longer, but he was very well known in the jazz community. His name was Willie Thomas.
Louis Thomas?
Willie Thomas.
Willie Thomas, down in Orlando.
He developed jazz, and he won. If people search, a lot of people know who Willie was. Of course, as a kid, he just was a kind of a nice guy and cool, and I studied with him for a year over at the Bandwagon Music.
How cool! Now, did you have anyone musical in your family? Did you have anyone around you, or were you the first?
Well, my mother always loved music, and she sang in the church choir. So I think the influence was pretty heavy influence. And my older sister, I had two older sisters, and the one closest to me, next oldest, she had been playing violin at that point for probably about 3 years. So, I heard it in the house, and my mom would try to kind of play piano. We had a little upright piano in the living room of the house. So music was around. And Mom and my mother and father, they loved hearing music. Of course, my father liked the big band era, because my father was born in the early, late teens, early 20s. So big band music was a big part of it. He wasn't musical, but he had a big heart for the music. So.
He appreciated it. So it sounds like you were surrounded by music.
So you were
playing So you were playing in the band program. You were getting lessons from Willie at the music store. Was there a point when things kind of clicked for you, where you thought, "Hey, this is more than just something that's fun"?
I think so. I mean, Willie. I started with Willie. Took with him there at the music store for about a year, and then Willie kind of took a left and kind of disappeared from town. So I went with another teacher that was teaching there at the music store, and his name was Joe Marat. And I studied with Joe. Joe was really good. These two guys, oddly enough, I mean, they had cornet school training, but they were more jazzers. I mean, you wouldn't be able to tell that hearing the influence. But I think in my ear, there was an influence for what they were doing. I just didn't realize exactly what it was.
But they were going over basic pedagogy, but you're on cornet still, or was it trumpet?
Well, I think the first 3 months we rented through the music store a cornet, and then I think upgraded to a Bach Mercedes. I think it was the next one. Went to a trumpet.
All right. So you were back, you were on trumpet and I mean, all the standard stuff, Arbins, Clarks. I mean,
All the standard stuff, the
yeah.
Schlossberg, Clark, Barband, um, Rubanks to begin with, probably the Rubank methods.
Hmm.
Uh, pretty fun stuff. Really nice memories. I mean, and Joe, I studied with Joe for I think about 6 months there, and then went to the fellow who was playing principal in the Florida Symphony at the time, uh, Chuck Gottschalk. I started studying with him, and then he was pretty much a straight orchestral trained player. I believe he had studied with Bud Herseth in Northwestern back maybe late '60s in Chicago. So it was a whole different thing. It was like no more goofing around. Now time to get serious.
Yeah. So were you had any kind of career plans at this point, or were you thinking of going on to college to do music?
Well, I mean, this was all when I was pretty much, like in junior high school. So
Oh, wow. So you were pretty serious
it was
already. Yeah.
pretty serious. I mean, oddly enough, I mean, when it's happening, you're not. I mean, I just know that I would, my parents. Nobody had to push me to practice the trumpet. I always liked to, go in the room and practice and at home, and no one ever complained. It was a good situation, with the family, all in all. I'm trying to remember exactly now. When I think it was in ninth grade, um, then a gentleman had moved into Orlando, and I started studying with him, and his name was Tom Woolwinder. And pretty much he's the one who passed away, who I just found out passed away.
Oh.
And Tom had been in the Cleveland Orchestra during the George Zell years, with Bernie Edelstein there. I think Tom was in the orchestra about 1957 to about 1972. And lucky for us, I mean, not lucky for him, he actually had to leave the orchestra because he had sustained an injury in his chops.
Mm-hmm.
And it pretty much ended his orchestral career. He actually is on the Columbia recording, the antiphonal brass, the antiphonal brass of Giovanni Gabrieli.
Yeah.
That original one was Chicago, Cleveland, and Philadelphia.
So he ended up down in Orlando.
He ended up in Orlando, and at first he didn't teach. I think that, it was a traumatic issue for him having to leave, especially as a young man and attain such a high level. He was like a boy prodigy and played in that orchestra for a number of years, and of all places ended up in Orlando. And he took only a couple students, and I was fortunate enough to be one of them.
Mm-hmm. Now, were you studying classical music? Were you studying to be an orchestral player, or was it just all general trumpet playing kind of stuff?
I think it was kind of general, but he had me, once, I had come from, like I said, Chuck Gottschalk, who was principal in the Florida Symphony. And then once I transferred, Chuck was the one who said, there's a gentleman just moved to town. He's a world-class trumpet player, and you may or may not be able to study with him. And I was able to get with him. And from that point on, it was just pretty much straight orchestral type of stuff.
Wow.
The Charlie A's came out, and then the Vasily Brandt and all those other Conconi lyrical studies and those kind of things. Mm-hmm. In the beginning, I mean, if people hear me now, they were like, no way, they wouldn't believe it. But it actually, I did actually was kind of ensconced in that for quite a while. But I still played, in high school band. I jam. By then I think I was on a 3C Bach mouthpiece, and we play, marching band, and we play Get It On, and we'd be with me and another fellow would be the one trying to like screech out the high notes. So my
So
teacher Tom, he knew I had other interests, but I think that he was really he was really straight and had me like still working on all those things because he had been at Curtis Institute and studied with Sam Krause like a whole bunch of other wonderful players did in the 50s. So he was real straight. He was a great guy, but he was when it came down to pulling out the horn, he was all business.
yeah. So you're playing the marching band stuff. I mean, was the upper register, was that something that came fairly easy to you or something you had to figure out?
It actually did. I mean, a lot of people say that it actually did because part of it I think was like I know I had good um, inspiration. It was inspiration to not be fraught with any fear. So I would try I would try at it, and it seemed to come relatively fluidly and relatively easy. No,
Mhm.
not too much pinching and praying.
So you're doing that. You're studying. Did you go to music school or did you just start gigging? Like what?
I did. I went to it's a small college actually in Florida, in still there in DeLand, Florida, which
Mhm.
is about an hour and a half north of Orlando, up in that region. Not far, about 25 miles west of Daytona Beach. It's kind of like in the sticks up there, but Stetson University had been a very nice university for a long time, and um, I was fortunate they offered me a full scholarship to go to school there. So I thought, might as well. And
Mhm.
I went there and studied. Actually, at the time I went there, they did not have a trumpet professor. They had the professor of brass, um, who also was quite well known, especially in the low brass circles. He was a bass trombone player. He's been gone for a long time. His name was Don Yaxley.
Hmm.
And, and Don Yaxley, like, I think there's still a scholarship fund in the ITA, the International Trombone Association, of Don Yaxley Scholarship. Johnny studied with, I used to call it the kind of like the Holy Trinity. Uh, Don Yaxley had studied with John Coffey at New England Conservatory, of those heavy hitters of the day,
Mhm.
As well as Arnold Jacobs and Thomas Beaversdorf,
Wow.
all low brass gurus. So he couldn't tell me how to play the Tomasi Concerto, but it was all about the fundamentals, about relaxation, moving the airflow, you know, calculating, just follow the sound, follow your sound, and just relaxation is the key. Um, he used to also say, don't be afraid to play with abandon, always have like controlled abandon when it's
Controlled
necessary.
abandon.
Controlled abandon when it's necessary.
Yeah.
Uh, I think it reminds me of an article I read many years ago about like Bud Herseth, where a radio interview that he had done. He said, "Yeah, there is appropriate times for crudeness."
That's
Funny,
great. That's great.
right?
So, I mean, at this point you're still young, you're in college. I mean, well, first of all, went back up one step. Was it an easy decision for you to go on to get a music degree or were you considering other things?
I actually, to this day, well, it's a little bit of spark of regret, but not too much regret. So I went to college there um, for almost 4 years. I never actually did get my degree, only because I started getting, meeting different people and kind of going back down to Orlando. And there was so much playing going on down there in the 70s and the 80s, especially, Disney and all the other opportunities. So I just started playing, somebody would call me to sub and I'd meet them and I'd go, sub at Disney or sub at some of the other um, things that were around Orlando. And bear in mind, 1975 or 1976, 77, 78, you could go down and make, maybe $70 or $100. That was huge, Um, I just started doing more of that and kind of just never went back to complete complete college to the chagrin of the dean of the School of Music. Oh,
I love
he
it.
was not happy, and probably never forgave me forever.
So during your time in college, though, were you studying with the bass trombonist? I mean, did you have any other trumpet instruction, or were you basically on your own, other than the fundamentals of brass?
I was basically studying, or I was studying with Mr. Yaxley. But there were times when I'd go back not only Orlando to work, but I would sometimes, if I were free, like on the weekends, I'd go back, because just to visit, mom and dad, and sometimes grab a lesson from Tom Wollender when I would come back to Orlando.
Okay, so you'd check in and see where things are at, that sort of thing.
Check in, see where things are at. So good. It was good time. It was good times, but I was starting to work, and things were kind of starting to roll, and I thought, kind of pinching myself, this is pretty cool, and kind of never looked back.
Right.
I know many people did that. They kind of, one thing led to another, and they never kind of like looked back. So.
Did you have any kind of career guidance? I mean, one of the things that always fascinates me, because being a freelance musician is so different than, you go to school, you get a degree, you start applying for jobs, and then you're in an office or in a school or, that sort of thing.
Of course.
Did you get any kind of guidance from any of your mentors or teachers or friends about what a career in music was like performing?
Probably just suggestions, but it was all, I have to say, in retrospect, it was all positive. I mean, it wasn't like, we hear stories, and I've heard stories and told stories. Some of my friends, with their history and their past, where they were trying to like, oh, okay, you've had your fun. Now it's time to think about enrolling in, the School of Business or something. And we understand that. We certainly understand it. It's usually like, your parents are freaked out, or they care for you and they love you, and they're afraid that you'll, fall, kind of fall down. I have to say, knock on wood, my parents have been gone a long, long time. However, they never said, I was fortunate. They always like kind of said, okay, it's up to you. You do, you do it. You got to pay the piper, and you do what you feel is necessary. So as far as advice, I just would start to meet some of what I call the old timers around Orlando, and it was nothing but positive, because they would, if I didn't know something, there was one fella, he's probably long gone, and he would teach me some of these little Dixieland tunes, because he knew I pretty much was straight kind of a player, and he really, there was never any, there was a lot of brothership, and a lot of the elders kind of, the elders that were in Orlando around then, kind of helping you along.
That's cool.
It was all positive.
That's great. So you're starting to sub in Disney. You're picking up regular work. You ended up moving back down to Orlando. Is that what happened?
But yes, I think basically, if I think back, I was still kind of hanging around the college to a certain degree, but I was working down in Orlando, and I remember working. There used to be it's long gone now, but Ringling Brothers used to own a theme park south of Orlando, south of Disney, called Circus World, and they had a full-time band inside this big room where they had the circus shows, and when I went down there and heard that band the first time, I got invited to come down and just kind of listen, and because a friend of mine was subbing in the band. And it blew my mind. I mean, it was just tremendous. These fellas. I mean, they were a lot older than we were at the time. And what I didn't know, which I quickly found out, that whole band was about 95% ex-service players that had played in Washington, D.C. in some of the top bands. and they had
Interesting.
retired, but they came down to Orlando because there was a lot of work going
Wow.
on. Like the
So you
leader of the
went.
band had been in the original Commodores. A lot of Airmen and Note from the 1960s were in that band. So they were rip roaring, and I started subbing a handful of occasions in that band. And then one time I went to sub, and there I ran into somebody there that day who was involved in the old ice shows, the Holiday on Ice, Ice Follies,
Mm-hmm.
and they were looking for a lead trumpet player, and he, we played together that day. I think both subbing, and he said, "Would you ever be interested in coming out on the road?" And I'm the leader of the band. Ringling Brothers owns the unit. There's 3 units that travel around the country, and I ended up going and doing that. It was my first. It was my first road gig.
First road gig with you said it was the Ice Follies?
It was a Holiday on Ice, Ice Follies. Yes.
Oh man, what was that book like?
It was crazy. I mean, John. Once again, not knowing, I followed the fellas who had been on the show that I followed were Bob O'Donnell,
Oh.
Mike and his brother Jim Paulson.
Uh-huh.
Those fellas were top Claude Gordon students.
Yeah. I was gonna say, you step in as just out of college.
Yes, I mean I pretty much knew I wasn't going to be going back. So I was kind of like half between DeLand, Florida, and Orlando, and then once that started, another one of not looking back, because those were. So I went out on the gig. I remember the smallest mouthpiece I had. I mean, I played a Bach 3C, right, and to me that was like a small mouthpiece. But I wasn't up until the time I started subbing down and around the Orlando area. I was playing a Bach with a B cup on it with a large throat on my C trumpet. I mean, I would say probably 75% of the stuff at college, I preferred to play my Strad C with a B cup. So
wow.
a 3C Bach was like, oh wow. But I mean, now we know later. Now at least he feels,
We'll get to that. Yeah.
You can play a Wagner. I could play like some Wagner or something on 3C. But I got to tell you, John, that the tours were. Those books were written for those guys, and when I stepped into it, I just don't know. I think it was just my mental. I don't know how, because they were really difficult. I mean, in the overture, and with Ringling, you sometimes, when you're on the road, you would play 3 shows on a Saturday, and I'm playing with local bands. We're traveling with a corps, and we're picking up local call players all around the country. So one city, I have fellas that are really good players, kind of not unlike many years later with Natalie Cole. I'd have very capable players. Then the next city, players would come on that haven't touched their horn in 6 months.
Wow. Just because middle of nowhere or something like that, or
middle of nowhere. You just that was that, and I think that's why some of those shows had to carry lead players. It wasn't for the cities where you have Chuck Finley and Wayne Bergeron and Rick Baptist. It's for the cities where you don't.
Yeah. Wow. So your first experience on the road. Before we get too far into your career, I mean, did you have any? Well, let me back up a second. You mostly, I would say, classical orchestral teachers.
Pretty much.
You said you had the upper register was fairly easy for you in high school and whatnot. Where did you develop your lead chops? Was that through inspiration of your listening, or what did that look like?
Yes, it was. I mean, I think. That for being on that first run of the that was a real eye opener. Being on that first run of the Holiday on Ice show, because a lot of the show was on a click track, so that was my first experience. Having playing with a click track, and there was some sweetener recorded stuff, where we would sometimes play along with the track, and sometimes they would drop the track out and we would play. And a lot of, Bob O'Donnell was on a lot of those tracks, as well as I think Mike Paulson. Mm-hmm. And so just me hearing that and the way those, that brilliant, beautiful commercial open sound, and the way they would articulate, and play stuff, a little bit more bitier when it was necessary. That was all kind of like, I got an earful, subbing at the Circus. And then when I went in the Holiday on Ice, I think it was just, and not the least of which, a lot of times players would come on with me. There were real fine players. And even though I'm playing first trumpet on the tour, I would hear everybody around me, sometimes to my peril, mm-hmm. But also I would also try to also glean, what I would hear around here. Some guy's feel would be really cool. Like, how is he doing that? He plays really relaxed, but he's swinging, but he's not playing behind the time. Things that start to, in my mind, for style and how to articulate, for articulation commercially and, different. I mean, I figured my approach physically to the trumpet is the same, mm-hmm. kind of pretty much, whether you're going to play, like a Gabrielli, play Gabrielli or play, on the Buddy Rich Band, but it's your equipment and also like, interpretation of playing the right style at the right time, completely different styles and articulation. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. And then I think that would surprise some people because they think, playing lead is a different set of chops or different set of, fundamentals than playing, fourth trumpet in a symphony. But, it's what you're saying. I mean, does that come from, like Arnold Jacobs and, Mr. Axley's teachings, or was that just through all of your teaching that you developed that?
I think, I think it's early on, just good, open, and relaxed sound production. Just for the simplest of the fundamentals, but kind of staying on it. I certainly don't sound like any, orchestral in that way. But my feeling, like when I pick up the horn, I want to sound good and warm and down, down on the open on the note without pinching or anything, like more of kind of what would be like cornet or maybe orchestral style approach, just to kind of play 2 or 3 minutes, and, it just right out of the chute, and then turn the wheel to the right or turn to the left, to maybe play some riffs or play a lick or something like that. Kind of basically staying in the lane of good sound production, clear articulation, good full sound, let it just vibrate well.
Were there any particular exercises that you would do to focus on that, or is it more of the mindset and having that in mind, doesn't matter what note you play kind of thing?
I think it is more of the mindset where like you're kind of like your mind is kind of set there, because I didn't do anything different than millions of other people do, with Schlossberg and the Clark, Schlossberg and Clark, mm-hmm. pretty much. I mean, I still do, sometimes I'll run, somewhat. Well, I have Charlie Davis, mm-hmm. sent me back. I think it's been about 6-7 years when he came out with the Bill Adams tribute book. Mm-hmm. Does that sound about right, John?
Yeah, it was about that time.
And when he came out with it, he sent it to me, so it kind of reinvigorated me. So I keep it out behind me now on my music stand. I'm cracking it open. It's a different thing, but I do more often than not.
Awesome. So I want to talk about how you got to tour with Maynard Ferguson. Was that was after the Holiday on Ice tour, right?
Yeah. One thing actually kind of strange how that works. I mean, we all know kind of sometimes it will work like that. When I was subbing, so after actually before the Holiday on Ice, I had met on one day briefly. I had met trumpet player Stan Mark, who used to be the lead player with Maynard Ferguson's band for a long time.
Yeah.
And Stan came to visit his friends. It was just a visit in Orlando, visiting a lot of the guys that were in the Circus World Band because they had been in the U.S. Navy Commodores together, back in D.C. prior to that, right? So I met Stan casually, like one day I was subbing there, and I met him, and so I did the Holiday. So I left to do the Holiday on Ice show. I think when I came back from the Holiday on Ice show, I was out for about 10 months. It was a pretty long tour and fun, very memorable stuff that I still remember about it. Wonderful. A lot of learning experiences, as well as trying to learn how to downsize equipment, which was a nightmare, but we all know sometimes that can be like that. John, so when I came back from Holiday on Ice, I believe I went back to sub some at the Circus, and I ran into Stan Mark again, and Stan Mark said, there may be a chance we're losing somebody on Maynard Ferguson's band. Would you have eyes to do it? And I said, Stan, I mean, that would be amazing. And it came to fruition. I mean, I think about a month or two later, he called me and said, it looks like we're going to be finishing up at this certain point. And the fella, I think it was Nick Drozdoff, the Chicago trumpet player, Nick is going to be leaving, going back to Chicago. And so I went on, and I went and met the band on the next tour. And it was out with them. Gosh, I think I did 3 tours, John, with Maynard, about not quite a year. It was in 1981. Not quite a year, but maybe 10 months. It was three separate tours with those guys. Absolute blast.
Do you remember who was in the section? I mean, Stan was still there, right?
I do. My first tour, oh, Lord, let me think. My first tour was the last of the era of Maynard having 4 trumpets. So I got in just one little tour with the 4 trumpets where we opened with Give It One.
Oh, how cool.
Yeah. It was like just a rush of like trucks coming, you could just, even back in the trumpet section, the way I still remember it was like, woof, like that. And then my second tour, Maynard downsized to 3, but I remember who the 4 were. It was Stan Mark, and then another fella, Alan Wise, and on the other side of this section, a really tremendous player. He ended up going. He probably should have stayed, and I should have gone, but Maynard just decided whatever. His name was Serge Yow, Yow. And Serge I'm friends on Facebook with him. We have not seen each other in 43 years,
Wow.
But we're friends on Facebook. He played with Tommy Dorsey's band before Maynard, and quite a player. He was quite a player. I remember he had a large bore Colicchio trumpet, and I could hear him on the other side of the section. Boy,
Jeez.
Not a big fella, but what a big sound,
What were you using on Maynard's band? Were you on the Colicchio by then, or?
No, I had this was so beat up horn, but it was like an old glove, and it never let me down. It was a 1966 Burbank Benge MLP, but with the choke bell.
Interesting.
Like the Benge's 2 bells, or it's on the one. Of course, you never saw any like 1 X's. I actually had one. They're the same bell. It's basically C trumpet bell, but just cut longer for B flat. Had like a real kind of a narrow choke, and it worked well on the MLP, which is kind of a large board, 464, I think, is what that was. And it was tons of battle stars, couple patches. Mm-hmm. I just would baby it along, and it lasted the whole tour. And then after that, it wasn't. It still played, but it had seen better days. Let's put it that way.
And I assume you weren't still using the 3C at this point, were you?
Oh no! A piece of the puzzle I did forget to mention. When I joined Maynard's band, I got a phone call. I think it was like the first week on his band, because I remember being in Philadelphia at the Ben Franklin Motor Lodge, or something like that, in Philadelphia, and my room phone rang. Of course, because this is 1981, that was the only phone there was. So the room phone rang, and I picked it up, and it was a gentleman named Bill Ratzenberger. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you'd ever heard that name.
Yeah.
You know who Bill Ratzenberger was.
I know the name, certainly.
So of course you do. So Bill Ratzenberger, because Maynard played jet tone, and all the rest of the trumpet guys, I think, played jet tone. Maybe Serge played a Purviance. Seems to me, because I had never seen a Purviance before. Before that, never had heard of it. So Bill Ratzenberger said, "I'd like to make you a mouthpiece or two because you're brand new in the trumpets, with Maynard's band, and I offer that to everyone who comes on new." And I said, "That would be great." And so he asked me, John, I didn't really know what to tell him. Not all these years later, I kind of know, just by accruing knowledge. I just said, well, he said, what have you been playing? And I said, well, I have a box 3C, and he said, well, can you play anything smaller? And I said, well, I don't know, maybe I can. I've never really tried. And he said, well, I'll make you up a couple of mouthpieces, and you let me know, and I'll get them to you. I'll send them to the road manager, and those mouthpieces came. He made 2 of them, John. Mm-hmm. They came, and one of them, they both were really good. Totally out left field from what I had ever tried before. But it worked, and I played that mouthpiece the whole entire time on my, the time with Maynard.
Wow. Those jet tones are usually a lot tighter, smaller. Was it an adjustment for you, or did you just kind of settle into it?
Well, what he did, I remember exactly now what he had told me. I know what they were, actually. Mm-hmm. He used a custom 2B rim, which was the most kind of comfortable. I found out later on, because I never played a cushion. I think the Studio B, Stan Mark played a Studio B, and they were kind of cushiony, and that felt like really weird. I couldn't play that. So this was a 2B custom. I think they had probably 27 drills in them, and they had the jet tone. Let me pull my fingers in.
Yeah,
symphonic backboard.
Oh, so it wasn't like a lead piece to at least in terms of the back end.
Well, he called, that's always been my joke. Like jet tone symphonic. For jet tone, it was symphonic, but for us, probably more of a medium. Medium.
Still smaller than most, yeah.
It worked, and I think it worked, John. With the physics, you know more than anyone about it. Because someone sent me a copy of that mouthpiece. Actually, Peter Olstead sent me a copy of that mouthpiece about a year ago. I have it up on the sill behind me. It's almost identical to the mouthpiece I played, and I thought, I played this mouthpiece all those years ago. How did I play it? And then I looked just on the inside of the edge. It's almost a straight drop. It's short, straight drop, and I thought that's why I was able to play it. It didn't. It had a room for the chops the way my chops set in there to kind of set in there and feel decent, and I could play.
Awesome. So Tell me, do you remember your first rehearsal or first gig on Maynard's band?
I do. Yeah, here, especially here. Yeah, when I heard Maynard play I about fell over when I heard Maynard actually play the first time. Um, I think I actually flew to Chicago and met the band bus outside of like O'Hare Airport. It was like really funny stuff back then. I guess kind of like on the road bands. Like sometimes you'd be down the highway at a rest stop with your suitcase, and then the band bus would come and pick you up there.
Sounds like the Muppets or something, right?
It's kind of like that. I mean, a lot of the road bands, they were kind of. I understood later on that they were they were kind of like that. And that's what happened. I just um, uh, I just had instructions to once your flight lands, come outside Terminal C and wait for the bus that has New Jersey plates on it. And I did, and there it was. And I climbed up in the bus. It was all strangers. I mean, but back then it didn't like. I just climbed up on the bus, and everyone said, "Hey, man, how are you?" It was friendly. It wasn't like you have to take a walk of shame for a while. It was very friendly.
They welcomed you in, and you started. I mean, did you know the book from knowing the tunes, or I mean, you just hop right in?
Just hop right in. I mean, I played. So I played third. I was on the trumpet 3 chair, my first tour, and then I stayed. Well, and they eliminated the 4th book, so I stayed on the 3rd book. Now, 3rd book on Maynard's band, there was some doubling. There was doubling. Sometimes, you're playing interplayed. A little bit of lead from time to time, just kind of spelling on lead. So you were, you didn't get locked into 1 octave or something for the tour. But I remember hearing Maynard play at that first rehearsal. We rehearsed at some some club room or something they rented. I think in Milwaukee, I think it was. The bus drove from the airport up to Milwaukee because we were playing in Milwaukee, and then we rehearsed at someplace up in some old beer hall or something in Milwaukee. And man, I mean, I was sight reading, but I'm paying attention, trying to fit in, mm-hmm. And and then Maynard at the rehearsal, he was lovely. I mean, I have to tell you, I mean, a lot of people probably had different experiences with Maynard, but I refer to Maynard. He's like the eternal Boy Scout. He was.
Really?
He had such a great spirit, and he would pat you on the back. He was so encouraging. He was something else, man. That guy.
Did you learn anything? Did you learn anything either directly or indirectly by watching Maynard play about trumpet playing or?
Well, I think just hearing him had the biggest impact. Because I mean, even Bergeron, mentions that a lot of Maynard's whole thing, people try to play that bit. He's a showman too, like leaning back and doing it. And coupled with his shocking ability, it's perfect. So I just would hear him, and I could hear him so well. When you're behind him, you still could hear him because he had a lot fatter sound than a lot of people perceived that
Wow.
he did. Really great, really, really great. I just remember him being a wonderful guy. I never heard a harsh word come out of his mouth. I was there maybe 10 months, I guess. And it was all encouragement. It was all encouragement during that period. I think, there were times he struggled. Not easy. You're fronting a band every night at that high energy. Far be it from me to say that he struggled, but there were times, after being with him, the way I would say it was about every third night, Maynard would sound like Maynard 61,
mm-hmm.
Maynard 1961 or Color Me Wild,
Yeah.
About every third night, it would be like, oh my goodness, He just would be, things would kind of consolidate, and then, he didn't have any other stressors or anything like that. And he'd feel good, and wow. And then he would play kind of like everyone else, chops are dragging, and Maynard's still playing off the end of the piano. Maynard's still playing off the end of the piano.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. And what about standing in the section with Stan Mark too, another, bellwether lead player?
Yeah. No, Stan was like, he was like the epitome of like, well, it wasn't the only thing about it, but he talk about playing with abandon,
Mm-hmm.
and and there are degrees of control. There would be times I would hear him, totally like kind of like wild animal, kind of like playing. It was exciting. Mm-hmm. And it would be where there might be a shred of control, but it was only a shred of control. But Stan had a way of playing in a really exciting way that really sparked Maynard's band during that period, especially.
Mm-hmm.
If you sat down and played a hymn with Stan, I don't know about that. That maybe nothing would come out. But boy, he was really geared up for what he had to do on backing Maynard up.
Yeah, kind of the perfect guy for that role.
It was crystal clean. No, was it over the top? A lot, but there were times I would. Rest in peace, Stan, because I always like Stan a lot. There were some, we had some personality things. I think that like sometimes he was kind of screaming at the guys, but that's kind of like the way it goes. I never took it personally, but there were times I would feel like I'm playing next to him, and we're pretty high intensity playing. And I'm getting close to him, because I always like to really be very careful playing, playing within the section, and really, really, floating out a nice, warm, clear sound so somebody can trampoline on top of it. Mm-hmm. And I'd get real close to him at times, and then I would hear him like kind of take a hard right. And I always used to think, I just don't know if he really liked anyone kind of getting all that close to him playing underneath him,
He was the lead player, and that was it.
It was kind of like that, and I don't mean it I mean it in the best way possible,
Yeah, well, and you hear that era of band, and that's one of the, I think he made that band, like you were saying, like his energy behind Maynard, and some of the charts they would do. I wanted to move on. You also played, you did a summer tour with Woody Herman. Is that correct?
I did. It was very short with Woody. I remember coming home. After my final tour with Maynard, actually the day before, is actually the first time I met Bob at the 7-Eleven Ridgewood Place. But I'll tell you this, and then if you wanted to come back to that.
Yeah, we'll come back to the first shop visit.
Yeah, because it was right at the end of that, that my time with Maynard. So with Woody, I went home. I went back to Orlando after I finished the tour. And pretty much immediately went back into the Walt Disney World Band. Because I had been in the band briefly for a second, because they had auditions during kind of a period where I was like at Circus World and before I went out with Maynard, where they had these big auditions for the Walt Disney World Band. It's the same one they had in Anaheim, the Disneyland Band. Mm-hmm. It was the same group. And oddly enough, I won the audition for the lead chair. But I already committed to go with Maynard, and it took me by surprise. So I think I played a week or two with the band. And then I told the band leader, I said, listen, forgive me. I've made a commitment. I didn't really think I was going to get picked, and I made a commitment. And he said, that's cool, though. He said, we may have to hire somebody, but if we don't end up hiring somebody, you're always welcome to come back to Disney and play. And, my mind was like heading out there with Maynard's band, so I didn't think about it. But John, when I came back off of Maynard's band, they had not, even after 10 months, had not filled that. They had just subbed it out with a lot of the handful of guys that were around. And so I walked right back into taking over the lead trumpet chair again in the Walt Disney World Band. I think about in the beginning of 1982. And then I was there for like just 3 or 4 months, maybe for 5 months. And I got a call from Woody Herman's, from Bill Byrne, the straw boss trumpet player that had been with Woody forever, asking if I would come out. And I was really fortunate, actually, because I got to tell you, if you did that twice to an employer, chances are they never want you to come back, But I went to the band leader at the time, was a guy named Mike Davis, and a real nice guy, and really cool, and very, very good-hearted, and a real good leader of the band. Mm-hmm. He said, listen, we love you. We really enjoy having you. Go out with Woody. If it works, just keep me posted. If you end up staying, then I understand, you got to go out and do like the road stuff. I went out, John, I think for about, it wasn't a month. Maybe it was just around 3 weeks. My heart wasn't in it. My heart, I took over for really wonderful trumpet player Brian O'Flaherty was playing lead in that band, 1982, and Brian had been there 3 years. The first thing was, and this should have nothing to do with a young person like out on the road, but I'd already been with Maynard for 10 or 11 months, and Woody, like lead trumpet pay, which I wasn't all that concerned with. Lead trumpet pay was $50 more than the regular, like in the section cats. But so with Woody, it was about the same as Maynard. Here was the huge difference. Maynard covered the hotel, and Woody, you had to pay for your hotel and Woody. So,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, those were a few, and money wasn't really the concern. Obviously, you're a young guy and you're wanting to, but it did affect me a little bit because I thought, I really like this band. There's a bunch of nice guys in the band. The lead book is quite challenging, but I kind of can do it. But my heart wasn't in it. After about the third week, I remember saying to the road manager, to Bill, I said, Bill, I just don't know whether it's kind of like going to work out to stay. And he said, well, Dave, it's either way, it's cool. I said, no, I don't want to leave you hanging. It was one of those things. It was 40 years ago, but he basically said, no, I'll let Woody know. And I said, because I've already been on the road for kind of like almost a year. And then before that, 10 months before that. So I kind of am not homesick, but I kind of am homesick, Yeah. And he kind of let me off the hook. Bill Byrne was a very nice guy,
Yeah.
And
well, that
so
also speaks to, I was going to say, it speaks to your professionalism too, where you didn't just say, hey, I'm out of here. Some great professional advice there. Don't leave anyone hanging, no matter, even if the gig's not right for you.
It's not me. I would never leave I wouldn't ever want to leave anybody like in a lurch. So I went back, John, at that point, went back and went right back into the, playing in the World Band, and then immediately into doing full time in the Relief 2 days, the 2-day Kids of the Kingdom Band. Funny little side note I should put in here. Many years later, when I met Bergeron, when I met Wayne after I moved to Los Angeles, and we were just like talking, getting to know each other, and a funny thing came up where he and I both, I think, at the exact same time, were playing in the Kids of the Kingdom Band. He was in Anaheim and I was in Orlando.
On opposite coasts.
From years before. It was just funny stuff we just even still laugh about, whenever I talk to Wayne, which is,
Yeah.
once in a while.
Well, and yeah, both Disney parks were, breeding grounds for great musicians, because you're playing with other
Oh,
great musicians, you're playing daily, playing fun music, challenging music, stuff like that. And nice to know there is still music in the parks. It's
it really is. It
yeah.
really is. It was great.
So before we get too far advanced, because I want to get to Natalie Cole and moving out to LA and Broadway, so we have a lot to cover still. But you did bring up your first trip to the old Bob Reeves shop on Ridgewood
Yeah.
Place. How did that come about?
Well, I'll never forget it. Even though subsequently went, probably 100 times after that, but I didn't know that I would be able to do. We don't know what the future holds. So at that point, it was like, this may be the one and only time in my whole entire life that I'll ever get a chance to meet this man, Bob Reeves, who I heard so much about. And as we closed in on the end of that last tour with Maynard, I just started making like a plan. I called, I think about a week before we actually, because we finished in Los Angeles doing a recording for Maynard. It was for that last album that he did for Columbia Records called Hollywood.
The Hollywood album, yeah.
And the way, when the tour manager told me, okay, well, the schedule's going to be like this the last day. We're going to play the night before, and then we'll have one whole entire day, do the recording session starting at 7:00 at night at Chick Corea Studios. I'm trying to recall, Mad Hatter Studios, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And, it was all exciting stuff. And so I thought, oh, okay, our last actual performance would be like on this night. And I have the whole day off, and then only need to be at the hotel like at 5. So when the bus takes us over to Mad Hatter Studios, so I had the whole morning and day off. And this was a big deal on the road because, it didn't pay very much. I rented a car, and it was the first time I think I ever rented. I rented a car, and I think it was somewhere close to LAX, right? Mm-hmm. Because it was somewhere over in that area. And I rented this car, and here was a weird little side note to this. I ended up telling Maynard that I was actually going to go see Bob Reeves. And the way I did it, I just called, the hard number that he had for years. And it was a young lady, I think it was his secretary, Haiti, maybe?
Haiti, yeah. Haiti Benedict.
Did you know Haiti?
Yeah, I still. She's married to Les Benedict, who's the great trombonist and multi-instrumentalist.
I had no idea she was married.
Les? Yeah,
I haven't seen Les in years. I had no idea she was married to Les.
Yeah, that was Haiti. Yeah, so
small world. Oh my God, that's crazy. But Haiti was really nice. I called and said, I'm a trumpet player. I'm in town with Maynard Ferguson Band. And she said, well, you could come. Yeah, you could come tomorrow. Here's how to get, where are you coming from? And I said, I'm renting a car. And she kind of gave me an idea. And I think the car place because I'd never been in LA, gave me a map, like the hard map. I'm looking at the map, no GPS, nothing. And made my way over there to, 7-Eleven Ridgewood Place. And I remember sitting in front, and then at the at 10 o'clock or 10:30, I walked in, and she was, seemed to me, there's a little desk, and she was in the front. And let me backtrack and ask you, John, did you know the 7-Eleven Ridgewood Place shop?
No, I've driven by it, but I never went in as a customer. I started working when they were already in Valencia. So,
yeah, because I just didn't know, even as a young man, whether you ever had gone over, been there when he was still before the move. Well, so it just was a small little front area. Of course, he had the split door,
Mm-hmm.
Always, and there was a little kind of a desk, small, tiny little desk. And she was there, had a phone and her a book, and it was very pleasant. And I walked in, and I sat down. There was one chair or something. I sat down, and then next thing I know, Bob was standing at the split door there, and I stood up and met him, and it was quite something. It was quite something. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how to explain it other than I was almost jumping out of my skin, so I just didn't want him to think I was like some sort of crazy nut. Of course, come to find out through his mouth that he'd already had plenty of crazy nuts come in there.
Oh yeah. So did you end up getting anything, or did you just
I did.
were there?
I did. Yes.
How cool.
I remember to this day. I think he may be a 41. We talked a little bit, and I showed him like my jet tone mouthpiece, and he made, because I think the ID was 640 on the jet tone on this, and he said, "Okay, well, I'm going to make you a." So he made two 41 S's. I remember, and with one with a 6.9 backbore, one with a 6.92 backbore, just to screw him solid under part. I remember that, and I had my bench, and I played on them, and he stood there and heard me, and he said, "Oh, you sound very good. You're able to." You adapted to them very quickly, and I said, "Oh, they're incredible. I've never played anything like this," and I paid him up, and that was it. And I left, and thinking like I'm glad I came because I'll never have a chance to see him again, not knowing that what was in the future.
Yeah, but that was the first time.
I'll tell you one quick thing though, related to that story. When I got back so then we did the recording session. It was all night. The next morning, kind of in a rush, because it was running way behind. Maynard's daughter, Kim, came right over to me and said, "Dave, you're the first flight out. We got to get you to the airport. I'm going to drive you." And so Kim, Maynard's daughter, Kim Ferguson, she drove me over to make my flight because I couldn't miss it all the way back to Orlando, And that was it. So I had my gear and my little suitcase, and that was it. When I got back to Orlando, John, about 2 or 3 days later, after I kind of came out of like the fog, I pulled out my horns and the mouthpieces. I kind of started playing, my apartment back there in Orlando, and I knew I was going to be going back to Disney. So I didn't even, so I put the Benj in the closet, and I pulled out, my other horn was a lightweight 72 Bach Strat, right? And so I started playing. I thought, maybe I'm just kind of stiff because of the road, like maybe I beat myself up more than I really realized. And I was having trouble. I put the mouthpieces in my Bach, and I'm having trouble. I'm thinking, wow, they felt so good at Bob's shop. I don't know what's wrong. I called Bob a couple days later because I was going to start going back and playing at Disney. And I called him a couple days later, and Bob said, "Well, you sounded," it's a good thing he brought this up. He said, "I don't know what, maybe you're just stiff. Maybe you're just swollen from like a lot of the hard playing that you did, and now it's kind of creeping in a little bit on you." I said, "I probably, Bob, but my chops don't feel all that bad. I'm just having trouble getting any air through the mouthpieces. I don't know why." He said, "You really sounded just fine in the shop, with your, your old Benj there." And I said, "Oh, Bob, I'm not playing the Benj." He said, "What are you playing?" I said, "I was playing it on Maynard's Band, but I went back to my Bach Strat." He said, "That's why the mouthpieces, it's a problem. Send them, whenever you can, send them back to me." Because I think they had the standard shank,
So it was a gap issue.
The gap had to have been gigantic.
That he had figured out. You see, that's amazing. And that was what, 80s, early 80s?
1981.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, not to go on a side rant, but we get all these questions today about the gap, and there's a lot of fake information on the internet, or misinformation, I guess you should say it. And we've been doing this for 40, 50 years. Bob knew exactly what it was in 1981, 82. Between the different horns and why things would feel different. It's not rocket science. All right, I'll get off my soapbox.
No, he didn't. You're right.
Yeah.
I mean, all these years later, I was just like, I'm so glad. I just casually mentioned. No, he mentioned. Well, they were a real great match for your bench. I mean, big, fat, full, a lot of energy, and when he said that, I thought, good thing I was like really paying attention. I said, "Oh, I'm not playing the bench," and that was what
clicked.
Ticked him back. I sent them back to the mouthpiece. Now, as you know, back then there were no he did not have half sizes. I don't believe.
Yeah, I don't know when those exactly came in.
I
It
don't
was
remember
probably late 80s, maybe early 90s. So it was just 1 through 7 whole sizes. Yeah.
1 through 7. And because he said, I'm gonna cut the shanks of the mouthpieces when you send them back to me. He said, you'll see what I mean. When you get them back, you can interchange what I call the sleeves, because I knew nothing, John. I had no idea. And he said, and I'm going to send you in a little bag. There will be, besides your mouthpieces, there will be a little sleeve marked number 5 and a little sleeve marked number 6. And you try, see which one or the other probably will feel better for to play on your Strad. And I remember they came back. I thought, wow, this is really cool, high-tech stuff. Because I had, back then I didn't know. And, with the rubber O-ring and everything, it's kind of crazy. And the 5 kind of felt, I could play the Bach a little bit better, but I still needed a little bit of follow through. And the 6 actually was the one for the way the gap fit on the Bach, and I played, I think that 1S, the 1S more often than not, 1S 692 with a 6 on my Strat, and had to do a lot of kind of heavy lifting stuff, and it never let me down,
Awesome. Since you brought up the Hollywood album, can you tell us a little bit about the recording of that? Because that's one of the rare Maynard albums where he had the Hollywood studio guys on there as well. Were you guys all in the room together, Jerry and Gary and Chuck? And
no, we were not. Sadly, I know that would have been quite. Well, those guys, may not have dug it. If Chuck and Gary and Hay had been. They may have, I don't know, but I think what happened, they just dropped in at, like post-production, like they brought him in to just kind of really beef up like the way the album got recorded that night. It was really delayed. I do remember a few things, John. Stanley Clarke was the co-producer on this album, the bass player Stanley. Stanley and Maynard, I think, were co-producers. It was the final album for Columbia. I do remember that. And I remember the session was supposed to start at 7, and I don't think we played a note until close to 11 that night.
Wow. Yeah,
it was. I think Stanley was like delayed. He was like out for dinner or something. I don't know. Far be it from me. He was like out for dinner, like with his chick or whatever. And then it was a little bit loose. And then I think what happened a little bit with that album, because I remember once we started playing, it took quite a while to kind of get the steam rolling again. Because bear in mind, we had just done like 3 straight months of like solid playing. So when the hit time is 8 o'clock, it's like, okay, we're kind of like programmed to walk right on the stage and go, bah. And the delay, I remember guys like just conked out and just laying in the studio. I mean, all the guys I was on the road with, and they're just beat up. We're young guys, but we just were so exhausted and tired. Yeah. It was delayed. And then, so it was a little slow getting off the track. And I think they had to kind of redo some stuff. It seems to me like later on that someone had to make a decision to fly in some sweeteners with like some of the big boy heavy hitters to kind of just beef it up and kind of shore things up. Mm-hmm. I don't know that for a fact, but it was just what I think really pretty much happened.
Interesting. So you spent time back in Orlando playing with the bands, and then you joined Natalie Cole's group, right? And that's what brought you to LA?
that is exactly what happened. So back during those period of time, it was playing all over, and all the other parks that were opening, and there was a plethora of work. It shocked me to say, but because Orlando, like L.A. and Las Vegas, maybe New Orleans, New York, and some in Chicago, those like 5 city centers, it was an explosion of like convention type of work. Mm-hmm. So we were always the celebrities and the people that would come around and do tours of Orlando and also play shows in Orlando. It was crazy during that period. And so we were working at the park and also kind of like doing double duty, just working constantly at night. Fortunate, and a big crowd of really, really, really fine, capable players that were there, especially then. We were doing tours. I remember doing tours with Henry Mancini, Johnny Mathis, Liberace. I did tours with Milton Berle, you name it, Rosemary Clooney. We were constantly swirling around on tours and then working full time in the park. So at one point later on, I think it was around 1991-ish, maybe around there. Mm-hmm. I had, by that point, had ended up for about a year playing in a show band at Epcot Center. Over there, Epcot. Just one of those like little Disney kind of ethnic kind of shows on the stage. The most difficult thing was sometimes sitting in 110 degrees in the direct sunlight in Orlando,
and 80% humidity. Yep.
Oh, it had just rained, and oddly enough, by the time a minute before showtime, the rain stopped.
The 2:00 afternoon showers. I've spent a few days at Disney World, with not playing with my family, playing around.
I used to have to cover my exactly. I used to have to cover my horn. I would have 2 or 3 towels and my horn next to me on the stand, and I have 2 or 3 towels and I just lay them over the top of the mouthpiece and also try to cover the horn, so it wasn't trumpet and B, and also burn your chops when you picked it up and put it on your chops. There was some logistic difficulties, but I'm a native Floridian, so I was, it still was a drag, but somewhat more acclimated to it than a lot of my cohorts and coworkers that I would see. They moved down from Michigan and then playing in Orlando in August. They were like in a delirium, It's awful.
Yeah. Got to stay hydrated. So where did the call for Natalie come from?
Well, I remember being at Epcot Center and playing in the show band there, and I think one of the local kind of contractors, if you will, who would contract from time to time around Orlando. There was maybe at that time 3 or 4 fellas, they would handle certain things around. I got a call and he said, "Hey, Dave, do you know who Natalie Cole is?" And I said, "Yeah, Nat King Cole's daughter." I remember like saying that, right? Mm-hmm. And he said, "Yeah, she's coming over to Melbourne, like in about 2 weeks. She's going to give a concert, and they're going to use a big band." I said, "A big band?" I thought she was an R&B singer. I remember saying that because she was, Natalie had done a lot of R&B, all through the 70s and 80s. That was her like big thing, And I remember saying to the contractor, "Yeah, I'll do it. Is it R&B or is it big band?" And he said, "Well, no, they asked me to hire a big band because she just recorded an album a while ago of kind of big band standard tunes and some nice tunes like Bill Holman and so forth." And I didn't think anything of it, John. I just thought, "Oh, that sounds pretty like it might be fun." And he said, "Yeah, they're not going to they don't have a lead player, but so if you can do it, and I'm going to hire a real good band." And so, John, it wasn't something rare that stuck out because I was already, I was working for so many acts already, and I never took it for granted. I mean, I'm not one to ever like take anything for granted.
Yeah.
I will go and do like it's my last breath the best I can, regardless. And so I thought, okay, I put in the calendar, Natalie Cole, Melbourne, Florida, at the King Performing Arts Center. And I went over there and played. And I remember when I showed up, her rhythm section, I could see like it was her rhythm section, because I didn't know who the guys were, except I heard the drummer just kind of warming up on brushes. And one of my best friends was playing lead trombone. He's gone now, but his name is Roger DeLillo, who played in Atlantic City and Philly for years, a tremendous lead trombone player. And he turned back to me. This is before we even played. We're just sitting there kind of warming up. And he turned back. He goes, "Do you see Jones over there?" And I said, "What?" And I leaned forward and he said, "That's Harold Jones on the drums." And I said, "What? That's Harold Jones?" Because I did know enough to know who Harold Jones was, of Count Basie fame, Ella Sarah Vaughan, Ella Fitzgerald, and then Count Basie in the late 60s. I thought, wow. And then I started looking at him. We hadn't played a note yet, And then the conductor walked out, just regular rehearsal in the afternoon. And John, I have to say, it was the contractor did choose good guys because it was really good. It was more of the upper crust, like good, solid players that were playing in Central Florida at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so conductor came. His name was Charles Floyd, and he just said, "Good afternoon, everyone. Glad you're here. Let's start off with number 2, whatever that was, Paper Moon or whatever it was." And so the band like jumped right out of the chute. No weeds in the flower garden, so to speak, right? And he stopped. I remember to this day, he stopped and he looked at it. He goes, "You guys sound really good." And I thought to myself, yeah, because I'd seen that before where conductors came through and they thought, "Oh, I guess I'm just going to have to get through Orlando and then hopefully, and then we'll be in Dallas and we'll be okay." You
2 nights you'll be in someplace else in the world, right? Yeah, that kind of thing.
And it'll be a real good band over there.
Yeah.
I think that people still in their mind didn't realize that there was good quality there in Central Florida. I mean, why would they? Kind of, and I'd seen other conductors have that same similar look. So then we played another tune, and this was really funny. I mean, God's my witness, so it has nothing to do with patting yourself on the back. But he stopped the second tune, and he looked right at me. He said, "Are you playing lead trumpet?" I said, "I am." And he said, I still remember to this day, he said, Are you using a trick mouthpiece?" And I said, I am. And it was a funny moment.
Yeah. Are you using a trick mouthpiece?
He said, "Are you using a trick mouthpiece?" I said, "Yeah, like, of course I am."
Yeah.
And then we played about 3 or 4 other tunes. And he said, we were scheduled for a 3-hour rehearsal. Mm-hmm. I don't need to rehearse with you fellas at all. I mean, Natalie's going to be stoked. Go have a nice dinner and we'll see you back here at 8. So he cut us like loose. Wow. And we came back. I don't want to make I know I'm making this so verbose. And we came back, played the gig. It was, Natalie just was like, I remember I'm looking right down at her. I mean, she's in front of us, and she just was like ripper. And I thought to myself at that time, not thinking about anything else other than, man, the apple did not fall far from the tree, because her gift of her intonation is just beautiful. No pinching, no playing on the top side of the pitch, no, not under supported. It's just, she could lob the notes right down the center, thread the eye of the needle, like her dad used to be able to do. I thought, boy, what a gift. She's so gifted. Yeah. And we played the concert. I think there was one tune Connie Condoli had recorded on the original Unforgettable album. And it was kind of scratched out. It actually was in the lead part. And there was no real jazz players in the trumpet section, and I'm the last one, that would do it. But it was in my part, and I thought, I might as well kind of like just try not to like make myself look like a fool because I hadn't heard the Unforgettable album. So I just stood up with my army mute and just played as simple as possible on LOVE, and then Natalie had the conductor ask me what my name was, and he leaned forward and I said, "It's Dave," and she said that was Dave back in the back, and I really like the way he sounds. But it went in one ear out the other, John. I mean, not that I did. I appreciated it. It was cool.
Yeah.
And then after the concert, the conductor walked in front of us and said, "Guys, this has been more of a joy than I can even express because we haven't had the best of luck lately with bands, and what a beautiful surprise to have a band that sounds good in Orlando, Florida, like you guys." So it was very nice. And then he looked right at me. He goes, "Do me a favor before you leave. Let me have your telephone number." Once again, I didn't think anything of it. I thought maybe the next time they're coming around, at least he would have another contact, right?
Yeah.
That's
so
all
you're just
I
thinking
thought.
You were doing a gig this whole time.
I'm just doing a gig. Exactly, John. I'm just doing a gig. And
wow.
Out of left field, probably, I'm thinking about a month later, I just was home. Wasn't working that day. I mean, oddly enough, it's strange because I usually work in day, and I was off, just in my house. Used to have like a pretty nice house there, and I think the girlfriend I've been living with at the time told me like to get lost, and she moved out. Whatever. You play way too much trumpet. I can't bear it anymore. Whatever happened, and she was gone. So I just like lived there with my two dogs and just hanging out. That one day, the home phone rang, and I picked it up, and on the other line was the voice said, "Dave, I don't know if you remember me. This is Charles Floyd." And I said, "Charles Floyd," because it took me by storm. I said, "Charles Floyd, you sound familiar to me." And he said, I saw you last month with Natalie Cole. I'm her MD." And I said, "Oh, hey, how are you?" And he said, "I can't talk to you right now. We're boarding a plane. We're in Amsterdam. Natalie wants to add 2 more players to the core band, a lead alto and lead trumpet. And she wanted me to call you to give you first right of refusal."
Wow.
I mean, you could have knocked me over with a feather. I thought it was kind of a joke first, but I thought, and he said, "Dave, I got to run. However, you're going to get a call, probably 2 or 3 calls tomorrow from some fellas in Los Angeles. But take the calls. It's not a joke. It's for real. And one of them will be our tour manager, and another one will probably be Natalie's her contractor from Los Angeles." I said, "Okay, Charles, have a good flight, man. Because I didn't know there was no guarantee. I said, I hope I see you down the line sometime, and safe travels." That was it.
Have a nice flight. Yeah.
It was like that. John, it wasn't like anything.
I love it.
Next day, in fact, is exactly what happened. So I stayed home the next day. I was supposed to work, but just in the case this wasn't like kind of like a miscommunication or something, I stayed home. Lo and behold, early afternoon, I got a call, who I ended up knowing quite well. I didn't know who he was, but I sure found out quickly. And I don't know if you heard the name. He's gone now, Jules Chaikin.
Oh, don't know.
So Jules Chaikin was, well, you could ask some of the boys. Yeah, Jules was probably, well, I think Jules, Joe Soldo, Sandy DeCrescent. Yeah, Jules, the top three Los Angeles contractors, probably for at least 40 years, I'm guessing. And Jules was a contractor for the Grammys for 38 years until he died. That'll give you an idea.
Okay.
He was Natalie's. He coordinated for her tours. He coordinated all the contracting. He would put contractors in place, and then personally contracted when it was in LA, because that was after I got off the phone with him, and I was pinching myself like, what in the world? Because your life, I already had played with a lot of people, but this was just kind of like another change where actually it was probably going to be facilitating a possible move, which I never had considered, and then in fact it did.
Coming out to LA.
out to California. Yeah, so I met Jules
Wow.
actually about a week late. I mean, about a month later, because I joined the tour. Everything's fine. He said you'll be hearing from a guy named Chris, tour manager. In fact, 20 minutes later, Chris called me and said, "Okay, give me your details. We're going to fly you. You're going to meet the tour in St. Louis, like in 2.5 weeks." So I had a lot to do to kind of like unravel, to take off, but it all worked out. And then about a month after I was on the road, we went back to play, I think, at the Greek Theater, John.
Hmm.
And that's when I actually met Jules in person. And I think I showed up for the Greek Theater, and uh, I think it was like Oscar Rashier and Chuck Finley and Frank Zabo and the trumpets with me. So
Jeez.
yeah, pretty heavy hitters. And I typically don't get really nervous when I would perform. I get the butterflies like everybody else from time to time. But when I showed up and I saw these guys, I thought, well, maybe Chuck wasn't there. There were enough heavy hitters there. I mean,
Yeah.
that's for sure.
With or without
I
Chuck,
met Chuck
that's a
later.
section. Yeah.
I met Chuck later. Yeah, I met him later on a recording date that Jules called me for right around the Northridge earthquake time.
Mm-hmm. So 94.
Anyway, that's kind
early
of
90s. Yeah.
and John. So me never like never pre-planning anything. Not really, because pre-planning sometimes it can be like you get really stuck when you depend and you pre-plan too much. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Or you expect the expectations can be like so high, like, oh yeah, well, I'm going to be out there and do that tour in 3 months. Well, maybe that tour in 3 months will not happen. So don't get your hopes up too much. Get them up a little bit, so to speak. 3 months on tour, which I thought it was going to be for the summertime, turned into almost 25 years with her, until she passed away in, January 1st, in the early mornings of January 1st, 2016.
Yeah. 25 years. And that's touring the
Yeah,
world, right?
almost 25 years.
You went around the
Crazy.
world, TV shows, Hollywood Bowl, right? BBC.
Many times, many times at the bowl, alternating for years with 1 year it would be the Hollywood Orchestra, next year the Philharmonic.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty good. Matter of fact, the first time we played the bowl with her was with the Philharmonic, and it was the last year of Irving Bush's last year.
Wow, how cool!
Of being personnel manager. I don't know if you ever met Irving. He walked right down to me on the first break, and he was so lovely. And with such matter of fact, he gave me a mouthpiece. We played Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I think on Sunday, he brought a mouthpiece, and he gave it to me. He said, "You may not like it, but it's one of the good ones I made." And I thought, you'd like to have it. And I to this day, I have that mouthpiece.
Oh, how cool. What a treasure.
It's kind of like a 7E or something.
What an amazing story. Just, you never know where the phone call is going to come from. And, you're in Orlando freelancing, playing with a ton of stuff, doing tours. And then one phone call can just change your life. And correct me if I'm wrong, you were featured too. I mean, besides playing lead, some of the tours Natalie would feature you, right? Or
there was certain times during the transformations. Yeah, for a while, her overture, like when I started, the original Unforgettable Overture was really beautiful. It was a real gem. John Mandel wrote it for her, right? So we can imagine, it was those kind of gems that she had in the book that were handwritten for her, like Michel Legrand, John Mandel, Bill Holman, Ralph Burns. Those, that was the way her book was beautiful. Like that, David Foster, et cetera, everybody. And we did the overture for about 5 years. And then I remember doing a rehearsal because she was getting some new tunes in the book, and they had a rehearsal with like the orchestra and big band over at Gower Studios, actually, where it was, because I remember going to Roscoe's and having chicken and waffles.
Oh yeah, good old Roscoe's.
Yeah, and it was like an all-day thing. I think at Gower Studios here, and at that time, Alan Broadbent was her piano player. Um, and she asked Alan to kind of scratch something, just to have another thing that she loved Mandel's overture, but she was, we had been playing it for 6, 7 years, and maybe just to kind of change things up. So Alan kind of sketched something out, and then she said, I think I remember Natalie saying something like, well, because I want to feature because at the time, for the first 10 years, Lanny Morgan was the lead alto player, right? Mm-hmm. That was another incredible shock to me, because that's what Jules told me back when he called me in Orlando that day to hire me. He said, well, we're hiring an alto player too. And I said, who? I'm just curious of the alto. And he said, it's going to be Lanny Morgan. I said, and I remember telling, I must have sounded like a total geek to Jules. I said, Lanny Morgan. That's what I remember thinking, like, good grief, man. That's like, I'm going to be out there with all these guys that are Mickey Mantle, and I'm going to be the bat boy,
Oh,
and happy to be the bat boy, So,
yeah.
Well, so Natalie said to Alan Broadbent, "Can you change up? Just kind of scratch out an overture." So for a while, we just kind of, played, just kind of like where I would stand up and kind of play. And once again, it's very obvious. Like, I'm the last. If there's jazz to be played, if let everyone else like take care of it, because don't let me be the one. But I would stand up and I just play a little kind of bluesy around, and kind of enough not to shame myself too badly. And then we did that. We did that overture for a good piece of time. So, and a lot of tunes in the book, they did. There was a lot of sax features, and there were a lot of trumpet features, and a lot of the charts. Really pretty stuff. Like,
yeah.
He was too good to me. Actually, Wynton Marsalis recorded it on that whatever particular album, but we played it live a bunch of times. So I would try to do, well, I can't do my impression of Wynton, because that's not possible, But I would try to just play something pretty, as pretty as I could, I guess. A lot of stuff.
Yeah. So, and I mean, that was that the tour, was it pretty full time? Because I know you freelanced around LA. You did some sessions, jingles, movie scores and stuff. Mm-hmm. Was it kind of off and on with her touring? And
well, oddly enough, with her, I mean, I can pretty much tell you the first 10 years were what they called the unforgettable tour. So it was like the zenith of her career. It was like the tippy top, incredibly. We would work, we would be out typically, I mean, during those first, like 20 weeks a year. It was 20 weeks, so it was a lot.
Yeah.
It was a lot. It didn't seem like a lot, because Natalie was besides being incredibly gifted and a wonderful chick, she also was really generous, and the treatment was great. It was as good as you could get on the road, so to speak. Mm-hmm. I mean, I look, like I used to say, like, I could carry, my, like, my wrinkled up, like, tuck shirt and my just in my bag, and then I would go in the bathroom at a gig and like change, and like we all have,
Yeah.
And then there would be, like with Natalie, where you just go in the dressing room, and then the wardrobe girls had already like pressed your shirt, and all you did was like take it off the hanger and put it on. I mean, never taken for granted either, but that was the kind of stuff. Natalie would make it as easy for everybody as possible because of her generosity,
So I'm guessing you didn't have to pay for your own hotel rooms.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah. Well, didn't have
like Woody's band.
Yeah. We didn't have to double up anymore.
Yeah, I love it.
You didn't have to choose your roommate. Yeah.
Any particular experiences in your time in LA playing? I mean, first of all, could you ever, as a kid from Orlando, ever imagine that you'd be out here playing in sessions with Hollywood's finest?
No. At that time, there was great, really, really, really good, solid playing in the Central Florida area. And I'm kind of like a homebody in a lot of ways, even though I've been on the road like a lot. And now, probably a total of about 30 years. But back then, my mentality, I would go on tours of Orlando, and I had gone, out on different tours out of town, but it wasn't in my mind that next move, farthest thing in mind was like, I'm going to actually be living in California, or I'm going to be living in New York. At that period of time, things were kind of peachy and cool, and they were, you're getting a lot of good level playing, and the pays were really good in Central Florida. I mean, it was a lot cheaper, obviously. You could have a great house for $80,000 with a big pool, that kind of stuff. It was okay. And then how life is. Life can like throw you like a little twist, and then all of a sudden it's an about face. Because when I got called for her, and everybody was like out of LA, and then I was starting to go out to LA and playing gigs with her, and I thought, I don't know, maybe this is kind of a sign, but there's no guarantees. You can go, as you well know, you can move and I could go to like Los Angeles and sit there and not play a gig for 20 years, except for with Natalie. You know what I mean? It was a risk, but I think it kind of was a progression that came relatively natural. And I always thought, well, if I go there and I can't kind of fit in as a good, decent, capable band player guy, can always go back to Orlando. Mm-hmm. You can always, I can always turn around and go back, but, it ended up working out okay. And I'm just trying to think like, a lot of it, John was working those jobs for Natalie with Jules Chaikin, a highly regarded contractor. And he would call all those top players. And he told me one time, I said to him, like, maybe it was another gig I did with him, and there were other heavy hitters, on the gig. And I thought, maybe Warren Looning, and then Bob Summers, and then Gary Grant or something. I'm thinking like, and I remember telling him at one point, like before we were going out for rehearsal, I said, "Yeah, Jules, looks like a great band again today." I said, "I'm actually a little bit nervous." And he said, "Why would you be nervous?" And I said, "Well, I'm kind of a stranger." And he said, "Dave, you play very solidly. I think that it'll speak for yourself, and just go and don't overthink it, and go and play solidly, and things will be fine." And Jules was cool. I mean, he kind of put me at ease.
Mm-hmm. Oh man, that's great, especially coming from the contractor.
Coming from the contractor, yeah. And not unlike another little quick side story that a little bit later on, the first time I did do a kind of an official recording for Natalie, I guess the first album I did there was one called Take a Look, and it was Capitol, it was all the kind of stuff, that could leave you shaking in your boots. You just have to like block it out and go do it, Mm-hmm. And I remember showing up for that one, not knowing who was going to be on the gig. And I showed up, and I was a little bit early, but some cats were already there. And I'm still, I'm a stranger. And I remember peeking in the door, and I heard Harold Jones was already there. And he was like laughing, and it was unmistakable Harold when Harold laughed. And I looked up where Harold was laughing from. It wasn't the rhythm section. He was up where they had the big band set up, and he was leaning over someone like laughing. And then when he stood up, and I could see who he was laughing with, it was Snooky Young, right?
Oh, how cool.
And my heart, like, once again, I'm not pretty prone to too much nervousness. My heart just went, because I thought, oh man, one of the greatest lead players of all time. There he is. And I'm gonna sit next to him, and I'm playing first trumpet. That was my first thing to myself. And I thought, well, it's too, and then I kind of like had to have a talk with myself. It's too late now. Yep. Go up and meet one of your idols. And I walked up there, and Snooky was as sweet and as nice as could be to me the whole entire album date. I've never forgotten it.
Oh man, what a great story.
And he put me at ease. He put me at ease too, John. He was like, I think he felt maybe I was a little bit on pins and needles, and he just kind of tapped me on the leg at one point, and he said, "Sounds good, baby," and that was it. That, kind of like the Vulcan mind melt,
Yeah, right. just that good. Yeah, I so many folks out here loved having Snooki around, through the end of his life.
What a beauty. Do you know what, John? I can't see you still, but I'm wondering where the camera is. Okay, my camera. It just occurred to me. I'm sitting right next to my little drawer here. I don't know if you could see it. I have a little 8x10. I could probably hold it up.
Yeah.
Unless there's glare. It was that day with Snooki.
You have it. Yeah, hold it up.
It's right here. I swear to God. I don't know if you can see it.
Let's see. There it is. Let's see. Hold it up a little bit higher. How cool. Yeah, well, maybe we can get a scan of that, or maybe you can snap a photo of it with your phone.
Yeah.
Text it to me or something, because that would be cool to have.
Okay.
We put on the show notes. That's awesome.
It just occurred to me. I just opened the drawer and I thought, wait a minute. I think I even have I was digging for it, and there it was. Somebody had done an 8x10 a long time ago. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, how cool!
Anyway,
so
isn't that cool? Well, go ahead.
I was going to say one of the things I love about your career is I say you've done it all, but you've kind of done it all. You've done the Orlando scene, you did the LA scene, and then you moved out to New York and did the Broadway scene. Can you tell me about what that was like breaking into the studio? The studios breaking into Broadway when you moved to New York?
Yes. And in all honesty, I was very happy to be in Los Angeles because of the high quality of the players, all the really wonderful players, that very well, and I knew it and played with a lot of in the time. I loved it. That was another when I ended up moving to New York. It was one of those moves. It wasn't because I wasn't happy in Los Angeles. I could have, honestly, John, I could still probably have been there to this day and have never had taken a different path. It was one of the decisions when I left Los Angeles to move here. It was a personal decision, basically, because my family at the time to acquiesce to try to make my family a little bit happier. You know what I mean? I think, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. There's more to life than just trumpet playing.
You dig. It may not register with some people who hear me say that, but it really, in fact, is exactly what happened. My wife was from Italy. She was an Italian girl that grew up born and raised in Rome. And a lot of her side of the family was obviously still in Italy. She hung in there with me pretty well on the West Coast because she knew things were pretty good, and also with Natalie, and that it was financially fine, and we all were comfortable, and it was cool. But there came a certain point, after being there, I think about 8 or 9 years, where we reached a point of it was kind of either or. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Either the personal relationship, then either we were going to continue, or there was going to be a complete split. And I just couldn't bear, because I really loved her. I loved her deeply. And I loved my little girl, Federica, who's now 39, during that period of time. So I thought, okay, I can kind of I can figure things out, and I may have to lose certain things. I may lose things that are important to me, but I've already had so many nice things happen that it kind of would balance out. And that really, in fact, is the reason we moved. And we moved kind of cold. I canceled three record dates the week we were having to leave. And that, John, that wasn't easy.
No one does that. Yeah.
Dateline or CAMS or whoever, those services, they call me. I remember one of them was for Bob and Dolores Hope at Capitol Records. Regular record dates that some people who never have a chance to even be on any one thing. And so I had to cancel this, and I thought, oh man, that's not an easy thing to do. You work your whole life, and then now I'm throwing it. But you can't look backwards, and that's when I moved to New York. From that, 23 or 4 years ago, I guess. And then all you can do, right, is try to pick up a few pieces from here and there. And but I have to tell you, and I'll get right to the old Broadway thing. it kind of worked out the way I think it was supposed to be. Like I said, knock on wood, I've never taken anything for granted. Because after I moved here, I started like being asked to fly back to Los Angeles. So I would take the red eye, back, and then, I did quite a bit of the American Idol when that kind of came up, and I fly I do a job here, and I thought it was pretty cool. Sometimes, like Wayne, like Bergeron, I think at one point he was like, he pulled a joke on me. Wayne may not remember, but he probably does. Like, we were in the band, they used to do American Idol at CBS, John, at Television City, although it was a Fox show. That's where we did it, at CBS. And he called somebody in the orchestra, and they handed their cell phone down to me saying, "Oh, someone's calling for you." And I was miffed. It was just at a rehearsal. I'm miffed. I'm going like, "Who's calling your phone for me?" And then one time Wayne was on it, and it was Wayne. He was going like, "You came out here and took another gig away from us." It was all just, tongue in cheek. It was all so fun, so great.
Yeah, I mean, Wayne's
that's
known
exactly,
as being. We had Wayne on a month or so ago, and he said, if he wasn't going to be a trumpet player, he'd be a stand-up comedian, and he's still working on that. So, yeah,
no question about it. Well, all these years later, I got to admit to you, I have to say to him, because I think I said it. I think I was able to say that back to him in a loving way, because we've always really had so much fun around each other. Was when he got asked by the New York Phil to come and play the soundtrack for the Philharmonic for the West Side Story, right?
Right. Did you give him a call?
And he came back. Oh, no, I went to see him. I went to meet him after one of the things at Lincoln Center. I was with Frank Green. And I think that night I was able to say, "Yeah, Wayne, man, come on, man. You came all the way out here, man, just to take another gig away from the local cats, man." It was so much fun. He laughed because he remembered him calling me years before.
Yeah, I love it. So when did you start getting the Broadway work? Your names just start getting around town, or?
Yeah, I think, and it, to be honest with you, John, I remember it was not, I think I was here for probably about 4 years. I think I moved the end of '99 or right in 2000, right around the millennium, and I have no illusions, because basically I'm kind of having to start over again, at 45 years old or whatever, and that's cool. It was what I had chosen to do, and I was not going to complain, just going to do it, because Natalie was still really doing well, so I was depending on that. Now I started to sub a little bit. Once I got here on Broadway, there were some people that called that I had known from another lifetime. Brian O'Flaherty being one of them. Mm-hmm. I took his place in Woody Herman's band. He had been living here for a year, and he was very nice to me, and had me come and sub some on the show Titanic he was doing at the time, and then little by little, I just kind of subbed around a little bit, nothing hardcore, but I didn't know who the contractors were. I figured it's just gonna either I'll play and little by little, or it'll never happen, and I'll just hope for the best where I can, someone will put in a good word for me or whatever. And it took about 4.5 years, and out of left field, after about 4 years, I got called from, he's just gone now. I think he passed away about 6 months ago. A contractor. He was probably the biggest here for 55 years or so. His name was Seymour Press. His nickname was Red. Red Press called me out of the blue because I had been subbing the Broadway show Chicago, which, by the way, is still running, John.
Mm-hmm.
It's 24 years or something. They're still running. And at that time, John Frost was the first trumpet player. So I had so much fun, sitting next to somebody like him and subbing. And Red Press was the contractor and played. But I just went and subbed second trumpet, just try to always play a good job on the second trumpet book of Chicago. And Red took a chance, I guess. Someone recommended me, and he said, "Oh, I heard the guy play. Sounds good." And he called me for a Bernstein show, Wonderful Town. And we did Wonderful Town for about 1.5 years. That was my first where kind of full time, and then it snowballed kind of from there. I think I've done maybe around a dozen at this point.
Yeah.
All good, all fun. Because I think one thing, I did that show for Red, so then maybe one or two of the other contractors, maybe they saw or maybe they heard or whatever and thought, oh, I like the way the guy sounds, and then now pretty much those people that I work for, they're either out of it or they've passed away, so it's kind of a new crowd now. So I haven't really in quite a while, actually, since I did Hello Dolly, which closed, now it closed 5 years ago.
Yeah, it was pre-pandemic. I remember chatting with you about that on the phone. Yeah.
Remember we talked about that, and I think I also mentioned to you that I developed an allergy to cobalt for some strange reason during that time. Because towards the end of Dolly, I could really feel it. It's like something is not right. I'm not jamming like I'm playing a truck. I mean, like driving a truck or something. So, but nothing. It was having trouble really functioning like anywhere kind of normal. So, I got tested at one point. It was like, well, you're really highly allergic to cobalt. And John, I think I told you that went in 1 year. I thought, cobalt? What does that have to do with anything? And then, actually, John, one of the fellas, I had a friend who I said that to back 3-4 years ago, and he's friends with one of the boys that works down at these, probably know them, Pickett Brass.
Oh yeah.
I forget who the young man was, but this friend of mine was friends with him, and he had been talking to this fella, I think Eric.
Eric Marine. In fact, I just saw him yesterday
That's
at
him.
NAMM. Yeah. Hey, Eric.
That's him.
Shout out to Eric. Yeah.
Yeah, shout out to Eric. And it was Eric Marine. And then we kind of had a discussion. I called him and he said, oh, no, he said, cobalt is, there's cobalt in silver, in commercial silver plating and also in gold plating.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't know about that. I guess it's a hardener, right?
Yeah.
And so that's why still kind of like I'm still in the middle of like still trying to figure things out, trying not to constantly irritate,
it's hard. Especially if you're used to the feel of if you're used to the feel of metal, and I mean there's other alternatives, other plastics, Delrin, acrylic and whatnot, and I've seen ceramic and other things, but it still feels different, and trying to retool from that. I want to kind of highlight something you said, because this is something, we have a lot of young listeners of the podcast, and they want to do what the guests I have on the show are doing. And I mean, you had already had a career in Orlando, you had already toured with a number of acts and big bands, you had a long career in LA, you moved to New York, and you said it was 4.5-5 years before the phone started ringing, just to sub.
Yes.
And you were dare I say a known entity, especially in the lead trumpet world and the commercial realms, because you're touring with Natalie and all the shows and artists you played with. And even with that,
relatively, you're right. A band player, people kind of knew after all these years, like decent. They probably thought he's a decent band player, and this and that and the other.
So even with all that experience and with that CV, 4.5-5 years. So if you're coming out of college and you don't have any road experience, you don't have any recording experience, don't expect to just jump in the day after they hand you your degree, right?
John. I mean, I know I see the young people too. I it's not fair for me to say put everybody like the young people, but more often than not, I think it's just because the way society works and with the social media and everything else, and everything happens like in real time or quicker. It's hard. I mean, I see people from time to time. I have some good friends on the younger side, and some of them have come over, play from time to time too, and they're having some good success. And I know they want to like get in, but it's like, I think people think, I want to go from 1 to 10, and that was yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have any patience. I'm not going to go from 1 to 10. Like I told some people like I would meet, and even people I would ask on the younger side, it's like, well, I never had a business card. I mean, I never had a card. That isn't to say that you shouldn't have a card. It just, I always thought, people ask you for your number, you can give them your number. Okay, if you have a card, that's easier. However, man, your calling card is like, if they like what they're hearing, then they'll think about you.
Yeah.
But I think people think it's more, you got to keep like the squeaky wheel gets the attention, and that works for a lot of people. So it's not for me to say it doesn't work. I have a lot of friends that, they're all constantly networking, and because I know that's the way the world goes around these days.
Yeah.
And as you know, like people will ask, how did you get, how did Ricky Minor call you back when you were doing tons of shows like VH1 Divas and the American Idol? And I said, I never called Ricky. Maybe I played a gig, with Harry Kim, and then Harry Kim liked the way I played, and Harry Kim mentioned my name, and because Harry and I played a lot. I think you know Harry well, I'm sure.
Yeah, I love Harry.
I love Harry too. I think Harry's one of the greatest. He's one of the greatest trumpet players of our time. I heard him sit there. This is like a Harry thing, man. He'll probably he may not remember. I remember we would sit there sometimes the rehearsals, the all-day rehearsal at CBS. Harry's playing his Claude Gordon Benge, great trumpet. Claude, great, especially commercial trumpet, but not a one-trick pony like people sometimes think it is. And Harry has this beautiful Reeves mouthpiece, and we're sitting there, and there's not much going on. We're not really playing yet. We're just there, and Harry would pick up his horn and play, the principal trumpet, like the excerpt from the Firebird, and he would sound like a world-class principal trumpet player, just, and then the next moment when Harry's playing a tune, then he sounds like a high note Freddie Hubbard.
Yeah. I love Harry, versatile trump player. And for the folks listening, I interviewed Harry early on, so you might have to jump back 8 or 9 years in the archives.
Okay.
But yeah, great interview with Harry, and it's been long enough. I should do a kind of a revisit him again and have him back on.
I miss him too. We've kind of lost touch, the way that things have worked the last 3, 4, 5 years. But he knows I love him, and we have a mutual. We did a lot of stuff together. Bless his heart.
I do want to talk a little bit because I know you do some teaching now, and with your upbringing, I want to talk a little bit about trumpet pedagogy. The first thing I want to ask is, through your career at road and in the studios and on Broadway, did you ever have like a regular routine that you would do, daily routine or practice kind of maintenance thing that you would do?
Not something that was, I don't want to offend any of the other people it's kind of like a lot of things will work for a lot of players, as you know. My whole thing was nothing so official, but I would always kind of go back to certain kind of baselines. Just like millions of other guys. Like I've never been one other than until after I got diagnosed with like the cobalt problem. I never really buzzed my mouthpiece, so to speak, about anything. Now, then of course it went way overboard, and I buzzed way too much. I'm still working on trying to pull back from buzzing way too much, because I'm trying to make the cat bark, and the cat's not going to bark, because of the kind of injury, However, I still, is just to let your chops, just play a second line G. I typically go, nothing official really. I'll buzz a little bit now. I'll force myself to buzz maybe 10 or 15 seconds. do a little like Bobby shoe, like I'll flap a little bit, kind of get a little blood flow, and then no pressure. Like just set it up where it feels and get it in my mind and just try to I want to get go for the warmth of the stuff. Basically, that's if I could say one thing, always going for the warmth and the warm side of the sound immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds kind of simple, but just like going for the, instead of let's go, the sonority and going for the, not playing too loud and just do it a little bit. Thank God, I've never been where if I don't do 45 minutes of my routine, then I can't go play. I mean, I've never been thank God, knock on wood, imprisoned with that, because it works for a lot of folks. I mean, I understand that. Yeah. It's not diminishing because everybody has to find their own way. I don't have any set, there were times John, now thinking about it a little bit deeper, I think it kind of goes back to like the road days where a lot of times things weren't, we're on Maynard's band bus, learning how to play kind of with no warm up and not hurting yourself. It kind of, oddly enough, because there were many moments like that, it's a 8-hour bus drive. It was awful, traffic jams and some crashes. And we get to the venue just in time where you go right to the stage, don't go to the dressing room, go right to the stage, we're hitting in 3 minutes. You've been on the bus all day.
So being in that situation, you have to sink or swim.
Yes. And I think it kind of, I had some kind of a discussion like this quite a while ago with one of my best friends, Ross Connick, who lives here in New York. He's been in New York here forever. Ross was on Buddy Rich's band during like the Killer Force band with Dave Stahl and all that, those great years, really rip-roaring band. And Ross and I have talked about this a lot because he and I actually, about 2004, I joined Liza Minnelli too, and she had a kind of a renaissance of her career at that point, and we played all the way up until 2000. We toured till 2015 or 16, almost the same amount of time up until Natalie died, and then Liza kind of decided to retire. We were throttling both of them.
Wow.
Luckily, fortunately, and Ross was with Liza, and so he's a great trumpet player. But we talked a lot about this because he said, when we were out with Buddy, we would do 29 hit and runs in a row or something, and you had to learn to play without a warm up, without hurting yourself. And in retrospect, it kind of trained you to just do the most critical, simple things, and then you're cool. You don't kind of need to relearn how to ride the bike,
That's great advice, and I mean, I've like you said, not necessarily for everybody, but would you like if you were having issues articulating or something, would you shed that a little bit when necessary, that sort of thing?
When I knew that I had time to dig into it, when's my next day off, or when I really can dig into it, and I know I could maybe play to fail, I would have no problem. I have like maybe a day off or enough time, like all day off, and then you don't have to hit until 9, and then I could stop at 4 and have plenty of recovery time. And then sometimes I would work on stuff and keep work on my fingers, work on timing and articulation, which I think it's overlooked by a lot of players. Articulating with a full sound. You hear so many these days. I don't mean kids, but the tradition's kind of like lost. That's what I learned a lot sitting next to John Frost here, subbing on Chicago. John could play a staccato note with a big, full, beautiful sound on a staccato. It's kind of a lost art, right? Mm-hmm. You kind of hear people that can go. It's kind of a signal, and it sounds good. I'm not saying either way, but it was really great when I would hear him go, yep, you could hear it resonating just on a staccato note. Mm-hmm. Exciting. It was exciting. So I think it's just touching, I would work on those type of things when I knew I wasn't going to push myself like to fail, to start like impede the gig. But it's almost like less is more. Less is more, especially when you're out doing these kinds of stuff. But I still would. I mean, John, you could ask all my friends. You could ask Frank and all these. They know that even since I stopped, like after Hello Dolly, I mean, even with my impediment and probably to my disadvantage, that's all I do, like 3 or 4 hours every single day. I never miss a day. Christmas, Thanksgiving, it doesn't matter because now I'm alone, for better or for worse. So It's like, okay, I look at the trumpet, it's like, it's me and you. We're back to being me and you now, and that's it. And, either I'm going to love you or I'm going to hate you, but I hope to love you, So I still, people, I rarely ever take a day off, even now, not going out to work, for quite some time. But I still try to do the same thing. Like you said, I don't have like a 30-minute routine, or I just will kind of noodle around, get the air flowing, make sure I'm not pushing my chops too much together, a little closer in the middle and lower register, just from my kind of classical training 4 lifetimes ago, and a little bit. And as I go up, make sure that I just, I have a pathway for the air to go. And if I feel a little bit pinched, stuff that I can overcome. Now I can't overcome, the chemical reaction. So
the allergy, yeah.
I try to be like careful that if I push like twice, not coming out, and then I just put the horn down, rest for 10 minutes, and then come back to it. Kind of like working out. I mean, for you, I know you probably do the same thing. I don't, when you play. I mean, I don't mean to be asking you questions, but
this is the other side of the bell now. Let's reverse roles.
Yeah, you're interviewing me. But out of curiosity, I mean, because you played great. I mean, you did something not long ago that I heard you demonstrate, and I'm trying to remember. It popped up, like I think on YouTube. You and another fella. And
is that the Brian from the Musical Mind guy down in the Music Mind podcast down in Australia? Yeah.
Oh,
that was fun.
Yeah, it was great. You sounded great. Just pick the
well, thank you. If I'd known you'd be listening, I would have been more nervous.
No. I love it, man. You were like, but even when you play, I mean, and I know there's a million things coming at you from every which way with running the shop and doing all the stuff that people have not even a clue about, that you're always like constantly doing it. And then, you have a family.
Yeah.
But with you, I mean, because I'm always curious. I mean, when you play, like, do you have a certain thing? Like, do you have to do 10 minutes, or can you do like a couple minutes and then you're like, okay, I can kind of get the air moving. I feel pretty good.
Yeah. I was kind of blessed. Thanks to my dad, when he was working as a professional musician and then working less because he was teaching and writing more and stuff. He actually got this from Roy Main. I don't know if you ever played with Roy, trombonist out in LA, that everyone in town studied with. Roy said, he told my dad, if you want to get better, obviously, and work on things. But in terms of warm up or getting, you do whatever you need to do as an individual to get where you need to go. And he's like, and it's mostly mental. And if you can flip that switch and, like you said, play a few notes, that's your warm up, or that's your maintenance. And, especially if you're gigging or whatever, then that's your time on the horn. Now, I hate to say that with young people, to think that rehearsal time is practicing. I'm also an attorney, and I need to disclaim everything, right?
Right.
But once you reach a certain level of playing, and fundamental ability, fundamental ability on the horn, it's wherever, whatever it takes. And sometimes it's 5 minutes, sometimes it's a terrible day, and I need to play through like an Adam routine kind of thing that Charlie would give me, and I need to do the hour and a half and beat myself up a little bit. So
of course.
But
you're right.
I'm kind of in agreement with you that I think a lot of players, though, use their maintenance as kind of a crutch. And, if you're in those experiences where traffic or the bus pulls up to the sound check in that sink or swim moment, you gotta make it work. The audience doesn't care if you've done your 30 minutes or 45 minutes.
Yeah.
They just want you to sound good.
Exactly.
And I think you'd be amazed,
It's, just, I remember having to do that kind of sink or swim so many times because I was used to kind of like having like 20 or 30 minutes of playing some Schlossberg, after being on the road with it, because I had to be careful with the ice show. I learned that really quick too. Mm-hmm. Oh man, because, being on the Ringling schedule, that first year I was on the ice show, it's like, if I had a bad problem, they probably let me get by with it for one day. Then the next day I'd probably be going home,
So it's a short stick, short rope.
Even back then. I remember having some dental issues when I was with Natalie. One time I'd gone back to Orlando because my family dentist was still there after all those years and trusted and everything. And I had to have a crown like on my upper left. And it was like the first kind of like one I had. I remember being with my wife. We had like finished, this is maybe 1995 or something. And we had finished a date the night before with the Nashville Symphony. And then our next date was like with Dallas Symphony 3 days later. So it was a perfect opening. We flew right down from Nashville, went to the dentist. He put like a temporary, but he actually, I don't know if you know if you've ever had a crown where they have to kind of like, they have to bring down the dimensions of the original tooth, Mm-hmm. After they do maybe some medical, if you have to have a root canal to make sure it's cool or whatever they do. And I remember it must have been around 94 because my father passed away in 95. So I think 95, maybe he passed away in 94. It's kind of hard to remember, but I remember being there, at the house, and coming from the dentist, which was not only a couple miles away there in Orlando. And I went out in the garage, just took my horn. My wife Rosanna is like visiting with my mom and hugging her, kissing her because we're going to be like staying there at the house, those kind of things. And I went out in the garage, and I didn't have a temporary. He had left it kind of open, I guess, after they had to do it like a root canal, and then they have to like let it kind of be unsealed for a moment. And I could feel there was like a big gap. It was about halfway back, right? It's not even like your front or top or bottom. And I remember picking my horn, just pull it out. I'm in the garage. I'm in the family garage where I used to spend hours and hours out there practicing when I was younger and was a kid and a teenager. So I go back out there. I see my little folding chair over in the corner. I pulled it out. I sat down in the garage. And I went up, I just went, bah, 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 bah. I got to play a high C. Then I went up and played a high C. And then I went to play just a high E, and nothing came out.
Oh, no.
And I remember my heart just went, boo. Because here I am, in the middle of a tour with Natalie. And if I can't play, and her book at that time, we played 2 hours like solid. And a lot of it fell between a high C and up in the upper register, up to double high C, and I thought, oh no, you're kind of like your life flashed before your eyes. And I remember even my wife walked out into the garage and she said, what's wrong? Are you playing a joke? She thought I was joking because I tried to play like a high E and nothing came out. And I thought, oh, so
it's almost an octave.
Kind of had like
more than an octave, yeah.
And I thought, wow. This, okay, well, tomorrow, God, I hope, he's going to put on a temporary, and then the third day, put on the permanent, and then that next day, then we fly to Dallas. I said, man, I hope to God this could be it. Me have to be like trying to learn to do something else. I mean, I tried not to panic, and I went, and we got a temporary bright and early next morning. It's made out of some composite, like nylon or something. And he puts it in there. It's kind of like a rough feeling or whatever, but he gets it up in there and they just kind of gets it seated. And I remember he said, okay, just deal with this for overnight, and then the porcelain, the final tooth crown will be ready first thing in the morning tomorrow, like at 8. Just show up at 8. It'll be here because I'm having them rush it. I said, okay, Doc, thank you. And I go home and I pulled out the horn, even just the temporary, and I went, oh, ba, 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 ba. Now I could play the high E, and I kind of went just up a little bit, and I could easily like play the G without any pinching, nothing. It just spoke and real soft. Because I don't want to play loud. I had to play loud on Natalie's gig. I just want to play pianissimo and generate the notes, And so, John, no kidding, man. So I was going to get the G. I thought, oh, God, there's just a glimmer of hope. I hope and then the next morning, he put the porcelain on, and then he got it up in there. They like permanently cemented up there, and it goes over the tooth, and then it looks like brand new. And then he did a little bit of sculpting of it because it was a little wide on the inside. And then I went home. He said, it's a done deal. I said, Doc, thank you, man. I'm just keeping my fingers crossed. He goes, okay, let me know. And I said, well, I'll call you. Like, I'll be back in Los Angeles, but I'll call you for the next time around. And I went out in the garage, and I could play. And I went, I could play right up to the double IC.
Oh, wow.
It's one little tooth
in the back of the mouth.
In the middle, your middle molar, way back here.
Middle molar.
But it's shocking how much it affected. Basically, I think the compression. There was a gap there. The air was like leaking, kind of like through the gap. And people talk about it. Even Bobby Shue told me when I spoke to him probably about 3 years back. We Skyped for a moment or two, and he talked about a molar, and he said I couldn't even play. I lost one. He said I couldn't even play like a high F. And I went back and got to put it in there, and then I was cool again. That's Bobby Shue telling me that.
It's amazing, the whole mouth and that compression you create. Yeah, you can't underestimate what effects it has. So
it's really
always find a good dentist is our advice, right?
Very important. Very important.
I know. Speaking of the upper register, before we wrap up here, because I know you've had a number of students, and reason why I know is that you always have them recommend us. So thank you for that. You had mentioned, upper register came pretty easy for you at an early age. What about for folks that you've worked with that didn't necessarily have an easy upper register? What kind of advice did you give them, or what kind of teaching techniques did you use with them to get them up there?
It's, we know there's obviously the physical aspect of like playing, but really after all this time, it's so mental. And I know that, people are like, what is he talking about? It's so mental because, because we've seen it happen, like if somebody will come over here and they're good, they're accomplished. Maybe it's one little thing they're trying to work out. And I think that it's just a mental creation to a pretty large degree where, I'm thinking high, when you start thinking high, you kind of predispose yourself for failure, It sounds simplistic, but I have never thought high or low, and you've heard this before. I'm sure many players have said this. I pretty much think right straight down the line. Like I'm trying to use somebody as an example. So I'll pull somebody out of the hat, like my dear friend Frank Green. If you watch Frank play, Frank doesn't look like he's playing high or low. It's just like it. And there are other players I've seen like this, but Frank is incredibly developed. It's relaxed, and it's kind of like just straight out of the horn. It's like a straight right down the street. And that's what I like tell when people just in their mind, like they'll have the appropriate equipment. Let's say they have a 41S and with a 692 SL or something, and they got a 5.5 fits good into their Strat. They've got the right equipment. It's just you got to let it be what it's going to be, and you have to be able to delete fear out of the equation, because what's the worst that can happen? You clam a note or you cack a note, but it's the only way to kind of find out how much air velocity you need. I think people mix that up, air volume and air velocity that's a real big point of that gets mixed up. I think a lot more of people that I see. Like I got to blow hard to get the high notes, and it's you and I both know that's not really the function. Controlling the air speed is really relaxing, and you can open up and find. That's why I try to do it pianissimo. Even now, I pretty much, even with the injury, I'll just once in a while just go maybe like little high Fs or something, a little G or something. That's it. I don't really pour anything onto it because I know with the injury, if I can get back, because I want it to be accurate and I want to be able to articulate and play the note spot on and be able to control the note, I can always add gas, figure out how to add gas onto it. Like let it be where, hit the note and then let it open up once you know exactly where the point is to hit.
I think it goes back to something you'd mentioned briefly about Maynard, about how much, he used like theatrics when he was playing,
It is.
He made it look like it was a big deal and he was working hard, but really,
he really wasn't working hard.
Yeah.
I mean, he was, I always see like success leaves clues a lot of the time, more often than not, with people would say to me like, how did Maynard play with such a big fat sound? And he never besides dancing around doing what he was doing. I said, no, physically as a player, when he's was just standing still and playing, it was jaw dropping because he used the right tool for the right stuff that he wasn't running the race with army boots up to his knees,
Mm-mm.
He was using track shoes. A lot of people, as we know, you've seen it happen a lot. They're kind of first of all, they're kind of suffocating right out of the chute because they're not using the right equipment for the gigs. I mean, most of the time I would use a smaller lead mouthpiece so that I could fit into, because 95% of the playing that I'm doing or gotten called for requires kind of like having a Ferrari,
Mm-hmm.
and then I have a C cup or something else if I have to, sit down and play a brass choir with someone, the appropriate gear and equipment. But you're right about high notes in particular. I was telling a friend of mine, well, you know him, Jeff Wolford, one of my buddies. Yeah. We love Jeff. He's kind of like, you want to got to use the right equipment for the right gig. You just have to use it. Something that doesn't shut you down, but you don't try to make the dog the cat bark. If you want to sound like you play a more of a high compression, low flurry mouthpiece, and then you try to sound like you do on your 5B Bach mouthpiece or whatever. Then you're running into the brick wall. Might as well just stick with your 5B mouthpiece, right?
Right tool for the right job. And if someone says, "Are you using a trick mouthpiece?" say yes.
Say yes. One funny little twist. I mean, I won't make it belabor it too long. Is it reminds me the only other person that said that to me, and it was so funny because you just laugh. It's so funny. He was a famous lead player, Al Persino.
Oh yeah.
Whereas when my wife met him in Germany, she corrected him because she was Italian,
Mm-hmm.
and Al's Italian American, grew up here in New York, but when she met him, she said, "Oh, Alfonso, you have to pronounce your name right." My wife told me that. And he looked at her like, what the heck? Al Porcino,
Alfonso Porcino. Yeah.
Porcino, like a mushroom. It's porcino. The C is hard in the top. Anyway, she was like, she used to do that. Bless her heart. But he said to me, first time I met Al, I remember we were there with Liza in Munich at the Munich Opera House, right? And it was right before we were getting ready when she was going to come on. Maybe over there about like a minute or two. So I'm sitting there with Ross Connick, and then I happened to look up, and on the mezzanine, like straight out, beautiful theater, whatever that was. Yeah, I think Munich Opera. Just up, one level up, with his arms like folded, with his head there, right on the front rail. Like it looked like he was right in front of us. He's up in the audience, but it's like he's right front and center. And I thought, is that Al Pacino? I happened to see it, and I turned to Connick and I said, Ross, see that guy out there, right, like in the balcony, like the mezzanine? That looks like Al Pacino? And Ross looked out there. He goes, I think it is Al. And I said, oh man, Porcino's here. Holy smoke! It was another very well known in his day kind of star lead player.
He was a legend,
legendary. And I turned to Connick, I said, gosh, Ross, he's here. Maybe I should probably like kind of play it straight and take it easy. And Ross, without beating a click, Ross said, don't you dare.
I love it.
Ross said, don't you dare. Because Ross
I
like
love
my
it.
older brother. And so, because some of Liza's stuff was crazy, it's like small big band, but it's still scored for a big band. So you have to kind of like feel your way through. You got to play multi-dimensionally. But Liza wanted you like, when it comes time to pound, you got to kind of pound it. You just don't want to overblow the band. It's kind of it's an experience. And we used to do a thing where we would runs, and the runs would go up in the high register, And so we did it, and I'm thinking like, oh man, I'm going to meet Al probably afterwards, and he's going to go like, what kind of garbage was that, And so he's in the dressing room, and so I meet him. They introduced me. I said, Al, so nice to meet you, man. It's an honor. And he said he had a real funny way of talking, John, right? And he said, good grief, what did he say? He said, I heard some double high C's. Was that you? And I said, well, I don't know. I didn't even want to talk at that point. And he said, were you using this is what he said, like the old timer. He said, were you using a cheater mouthpiece?
Oh my God.
And I said, of course I am.
Yeah.
That was my first time meeting Al Pacino. Funny guy.
Funny. What did he say anything else after that? Where you just?
Well, he did. No, he was very pleasant. We had like all the rest of the guys in the band hung. I mean, only Connick and I were the only two trumpet players, but everybody in the band hung because it was Al Pacino.
It was Al. Amazing. What a story. Well, I'm glad you shared.
Cheater mouthpiece. Yeah.
The cheater mouthpiece.
The cheater, like the old timers used to say, remember? Yeah, cheater.
Oh my God. Well, Dave, thank you so much for your time today and so many great stories. I mean, we could literally talk all day, and I hope to have you back on to share some more stories.
John, it's been my pleasure. I know I get on a roll, but
Oh, I love it. I love it. Like I said, it's internet time, and I have folks that are commuting and listen on flights and listen falling asleep at night, and so the stories need to be out there, and certainly your experience going from coast to coast and then back again was absolutely a joy.
Yeah, it's been at this point. I mean, I'm 66, so it's like it's kind of a ride, happy for it, very very happy, never took it for granted. So always on it. I mean, I figure even now, not really going out and working, I probably will go back at one point. My full-time job is practicing the trumpet, so that it still is. It always was.
The passion's still there. Before I let you go, if you could leave our listeners with one last piece of advice that you would consider your best piece of advice, what would that be?
You have to have the desire. Don't let anyone push you to the left or right. If you have the desire, the intent, the willpower, and the discipline to make it happen, it all lies within you. It all lies within you. What are you willing to do to achieve your dream?
That's it. Dave, what an absolute joy. I'm speechless. It was so much fun today. I'm like a kid in the candy shop. I can't wait to see you in New York and give you a big hug.
Oh, me too. I'm sorry I missed you that last time around at Dylan's, but we will. And Preston's going like, wait, I've got a huge job editing this one today. You're a handsome young man, you know.
Preston, make sure you leave that in. Well, a huge thank you to Dave for spending so much time sharing stories. We literally could have talked all day, and Dave has so many stories. It's great. I mean, I pinch myself because not only am I the luckiest person in the world with where I work, getting to do this podcast and just talk to people about their lives and chat, and I get paid to do it. I mean, it's really amazing to think about. And through the years, Dave has just been so kind to Bob Reeves and to myself personally. Every time Dave calls for a mouthpiece or something, he'll always ask for me, and then we'll just talk about Maynard or trumpet playing or life or Italian food, whatever it is. And, I've been wanting to have Dave on the podcast because he really is a gem, one of my favorite lead players of all time. And, a guy that, because of social media and whatnot, he doesn't do that kind of thing. You don't really hear his name a lot as some of the other players out there. And but if you dig into the albums and there's some great clips of Dave on YouTube, they speak for themselves. So, and listening to Dave's stories and his career, absolutely amazing player and teacher as well. I should mention he sends a number of his students out our way, which I'm very grateful for. And a lot of his students are making their names as well in the commercial and Broadway scenes and in other idioms as well. So thank you, Dave, for being on here. Great seeing you and virtually speaking, and can't wait to see you in person. Maybe next time we're out in New York, we'll do a hang. And thank you for listening. We have some great interviews coming up, scheduled. Tony Plogue, the trumpet player, soloist, record label creator, composer, teacher. I mean, Tony does it all. And podcast host. I can't forget that. Tony will be up next, as well as some other really cool guests. So make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that 5-star review button. And I always appreciate the constructive criticism. I always appreciate guest requests. We have that master list. And thank you to all the folks that come up and say hello, either by phone, email, or in person. I know Zach came up at TMEA to talk about how much he appreciates the podcast. And I get phone calls and emails almost daily. And I can't tell you how much it means to me and the rest of us here at the shop. So until next time, let's go out and make some music.